Afternoon, all of you. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. Actually, today the IES interview results came. I mean, the mains, the written exam results. So one good news is that Sandeep sir has qualified it. So, he was very happy. And अरे उनको बुला के क्लैपिंग करवाता हो तो बट अभी उनको फाइनल क्वालिफाई करने दो वरना पहले क्लैप कर देंगे तो गड़बड़ होगी इट्स जस्ट द इंटरव्यू एंड गुड थिंग इज दैट दे हैव कॉल्ड ओनली 39 people for interview this time out of 22 seats that they have advertised. So that gives the ratio makes the ratio quite favorable. Another news that I wanted to share with you was that out of 39 people whom they have called, 24 have been my students. So, इसमें तो मुझे मजा आ रहा है. Even I am enjoying that. So that was the reason I just got delayed because I was just analyzing it with Sandeep sir that how many have been my students because I started getting the messages since afternoon. I was taking a class at 2:30. Suddenly when I saw my message inbox filled more than usual, I got worried कि कहीं कोई क्योंकि हमारी एज में आते आते बहुत लोग बहुत जगह रहते हैं जो कहीं भी निकल सकते हैं तो मैं जब ज़रूरत से ज़्यादा मैसेज आते हैं तो मैं वही डर जाता हूँ कि कोई निकल तो नहीं लिए कहीं साइड में बट देन आई सॉ नहीं कुछ और ही बात हो रही है यहाँ सो दैट इज़ वाई हैड टू मेक यू वेट फॉर 5-7 minutes. But let's see. So what we will do today, yesterday we got over till the part on India till 91. What we will do today is we will begin talking on saving investment flow in India. It is again a question that is very often asked. तो हम एक अभी से आते ही चले जाओ कोई कल ग्रुप में भी लिख रहे थे somebody dropped the bottle. When I am writing answers, then I am immune to writing bottles dropping or even nuclear bomb dropping. Answer लिखते हुए मैं बिल्कुल अपने zone में होता हूँ. Okay, coming to this now. So what we will do is we will develop a question actually. Again, जो मैं discuss कर रहा हूँ आपके साथ. This is trends on saving and investment. There's one more thing I had to tell you. You will get the message. On coming Sunday, I will be meeting you for a Zoom session. It is optional entirely. For offline people, even more than optional, all right? Because you get to solve your doubts with me directly. But I will be creating a Zoom session for doubts on this coming Sunday, all right? It will be open for both offline and online. Those of you who may have a doubt here or there can always come in and join that session. All right, so this coming Sunday we will do that, a Zoom session for doubts, only doubts, and doubts on whatever we have covered till now. All right, so if you have any doubts, you want to join that Zoom session, you will get the link by tomorrow and you can join it on Sunday. Timings I have not yet decided. I will have to check my Sunday schedule that how am I working on Sunday to decide on the timings that I'll give you. But I have planned it. I've told the team that they will arrange a schedule for me. All right. ओके पार्टी एक बार खैर पार्टी देने में तो मुझे वैसे ही मजा आते रहता है देख नहीं रहे तोंद मेरी झलका रही है उसको लेकिन पार्टी के लिए मैं थोड़ा वेट करता हूँ आई एम अ वेरी सुपरस्टिशियस पर्सन एक बार फाइनल रिजल्ट आ जाने दो उसके बाद जरूर पार्टी करेंगे जब तक फाइनल रिजल्ट नहीं आता मैं 2 फिंगर तो छोड़ो पूरे हाथ पैर सबके फिंगर क्रॉस रखता हूँ दैट हाउ मेनी ऑफ माई बिकॉज आई हैव an aim in the mind of reaching 100% qualification in whosoever qualifies in IES or optional whom I have taught. तो वो एक मैं जानता हूँ वो बहुत ambitious aim है but ambitious aim रखने में हर्जी क्या है भारतीय 5-year plan का product हूँ तो रखूंगा ही so I always keep that aim that I will work as hard as possible and I have a lot of confidence on all of you that you work as hard as possible. So definitely we'll reach a day when everybody will qualify from the system. I mean, all qualifications will be from people whom I have taught. तो लेकिन इस बार के qualification results आ जाने दो महीने 2 महीने की बात है. We'll definitely have a party. Normally my batches get over, like your batch will get over hopefully before January 2nd week. नहीं तो हर साल 12 जनवरी मेरे बर्थडे में आप लोग को मैं खिलाता पिलाता ज़रूर हूँ क्योंकि मुझे लगता है कि आप लोग खा लेते हैं तो मैं भी खा लेता हूँ मेरी उम्र में ज़्यादा खाने पे प्रतिबंध रहता है तो इसीलिए but otherwise also I'll definitely will have a party. Let the final result come and we'll definitely have it. I'm never aversive to it. we will talk about the price of currency part. You will have to wait on that, Venkatesh. Thanks a lot, everybody online who is missing me. Acha, include us in party too, sir. Divyanshi. Divyanshi, you are in Delhi, so you can always drop in. All those who are in Delhi can always drop into the. In fact, last year it happened when we were celebrating our farewell day, like last day of class. Offline people were there, and I think online people were there more than the offline people. You know, on that particular day, many had in fact traveled from Agra and nearby places like Mathura to attend the class. In fact, one girl had come from Balasore. So just to attend it, Odisha, just to attend the farewell class. Because by the time we get over, we get connected. In fact, I remain connected to you forever. That's a bad thing. Professionals should not have emotional connect. But maybe I'm a bad professional. Then I have a huge emotional connect with my students. मुझे लगता है कि मैं ही आपका कुछ कर सकता हूँ. गलत ख्याल है मेरा. पर मुझे लगता नहीं मैंने जवाब नहीं दिया तो उसी से कुछ गड़बड़ हो जाएगी. So even in the nights I'm teaching and in my sleeps I'm teaching. तो सब चलता रहता है. But anyways, कभी-कभी तो इंटरेक्शन भी होता रहता है. एक आधा बार तो ये भी सपना देखा कि कोई मेरे स्टूडेंट को मैं देख रहा हूँ, मैं कहीं पार्टी में गया, उनको देख लिया तो उनको डांट रहा हूँ, तुम यहाँ क्या कर रहे हो, पढ़ाई करो. You don't have to be here. You know, शुक्र है उन्होंने पलट कर नहीं पूछा कि तुम यहाँ क्या कर रहे हो, तुम भी पढ़ाओ जाओ. You know? Okay, so what we are discussing is trends on saving and investment. This trends on saving and investment we will at the moment discuss from something like 47 till 92. And when I'm teaching you India after 92, I will be completing the trend part, the trend from 92 to till now. All right. Because even the last 30 years, the trend has been pretty interesting. The first 45 years, the trend was interesting. Now, some part of it, your notes have it. So I just want you to open up your notes on page 13, trends in saving and investment before 91. Saving वाली बातें हम लोग यहाँ से करेंगे. और इन्वेस्टमेंट पे मैं आपको डिक्टेट करूंगा. On savings part, I will talk to you from here. On investment also, we have the points in your notes, but I will give you more detailed, discussion. So savings part, if you could open page 13 in your notes, page 13, it says trends in saving and investment before 91. I hope everybody online and offline has access to it now. Access again, I repeat. If you have not brought it today, I'm sure you can have an access to that. Now, when we talk about trends in saving and investment, it becomes important because as it is savings play and investment play an important role in development of an underdeveloped country. In fact, the first 5-year plan that we made was based on Harrod-Domar model. And that Harrod-Domar model was again giving a signal or was giving us an idea about how growth can be savings-led. That if you improve your savings and improve your investment, so how growth can be savings-led. That was the Harrod-Domar model that we were having. Now, if we look into trends in saving and investment before 1991, अब देखना मैं definition पढ़ रहा हूँ फिर explain करूँगा. The Central Statistical Office, now it is called National Statistical Office. Earlier there used to be a separate CSO and NSSO. Now the government has combined NSSO, National Sample Survey Organization, and CSO, and now we have a singular NSO, National Statistical Office. All right, so all of you should keep it in mind that when you study the term NSO now, National Statistical Office, it is a combination of Central Statistical Office and National Sample Survey Organization. So now the CSO defines savings as excess of current income over current expenditure, and it is the balancing item. Income and expenditure के बीच का फर्क जो हुआ, CSO बोलते हैं वो savings हुआ. All right, whatever is the difference between income and expenditure becomes your savings. So they say that you will have household enterprises in the market, you will have firms in the market, production enterprises, and you will have government. All of them will have their receipts, their income. Like for government, it can be tax, or it can be fee or fine collected. It can be the public sector undertakings profit. Households, it can be income, like wage, rent, and interest. For firm, it can be their profit. So all of these will have their inflows, and all of these will have their outflows. Whatever is the balancing element between them will qualify as savings. Or your inflows minus your outflows, the balancing element will qualify as savings. If you ask me here, actually savings get qualified. I want you to read this, get into the third paragraph there. The savings of households are measured. You see that? Now, that's important. You have to keep it in mind. Whenever you write any answer on savings investment, you should begin by defining what all is included in saving and what all is included in investment. So, the savings of households are measured as total financial savings and savings in the form of physical assets, which are construction, machinery equipment, and stocks held by the household sector. Understand this. फाइनेंशियल सेविंग मतलब जो शेयर्स खरीदे आपने, जो बॉन्ड्स खरीदे, जो घर में डिपॉजिट रखा, जो सेविंग्स की बैंक में, these are our financial savings. So all financial savings of household, but it doesn't end there. Along with that, it also includes construction, that is housing. All right, housing as a saving for household. It also includes equipments and machinery. Suppose I am an agricultural household and I have kept a thresher, I have kept an harvester in my house. Even that will be counted as my savings. You understand that? I'll just take a second. And then it includes all savings of the corporate. Corporate profit के तीन parts होते हैं. The three parts are dividend that they distribute among people, the corporate tax that they pay, and undistributed profit. This undistributed profit again represents savings of the corporate. This undistributed profit again represents savings of the corporate. All right. So I repeat again, it is about savings of the corporate that we talk about. All right. It is about savings of the corporate that we talk about in terms of undistributed profit. तो कॉर्पोरेट सेविंग्स हुई वो प्रॉफिट जो ना उन्हें डिविडेंड में देना पड़ा और जो टैक्स देने के बाद उनके पास बच गया. ऑलराइट, सो द प्रॉफिट, पार्ट ऑफ द प्रॉफिट ऑफ कॉर्पोरेट which they don't give as dividend and which is left with them after paying the tax. Household savings, I repeat again, household savings are savings that households do in financial asset plus the equipment and the machine and the housing that the households have. And government saving is nothing but the budget surplus. Government saving is nothing but the budget surplus. That is, if there is a fiscal deficit and government has to borrow, then that will count as a government dis-saving. If there is a fiscal deficit and government has to borrow, then that will count as a dis-saving. All right. So that is between saving and dis-saving. The idea is that. I can believe you stick to this. I had a hand raised. Yes, yes. No, I'll be teaching you that. See, in economics, whenever it is a financial asset that you are purchasing, that is always taken as savings. Investment means addition to the stock of capital goods. So unless you are not purchasing a new capital good, it can be a new house, it can be a new factory, it can be a new machine, till then you don't count it as investment. So investment got to be addition to the stock of capital goods. Right, since it's for household, that is why it is on both savings side and investment side. All right, it will be on both sides. Yes, yes. Gold in bullion terms, bar terms, with the households which is reported, is taken as savings. But gold in bar terms, gold in jewelry terms is taken as consumption. All right. And gold in even bullion terms lying with the jewelry shop owner or gold manufacturer is an intermediate good. Yeah. That is the bar term in terms of bars. All right. So if you are holding gold in a bar term, that will be counted as savings. What? You mean the gold bonds? All right. That is saving, of course. It's a financial asset. Yes, yes. All right. Now this is the definition of savings. First of all, understand that. All those parts of profit which are not given out as dividend and which are left after paying the tax. All right, that is taken as savings. Oh, that is because there will be something that households keep for the purpose of getting returns in future, hence taken as savings. All right, now see, the next thing is we do look into the trends. So 1950 to 1967, we call it the low saving phase. अब मैं चाहता हूं वहां पर बस आप एक बात ऐड कर लो, आपके नोट्स में मिसिंग है. 1950 to 1967, low saving phase. In 1950, savings rate in India was approximately 4% to 5% of GDP. By 1955, government had mobilized it decently and it had started touching 8% to 9% of GDP. And by 1967, the ending portion, it was almost 12% to 13%, 14% rather, of GDP. We don't have very strong data here because in those days people were not measuring things as we do today in as much detail. But this is that is why ये range दिख रहा है. All right. So it was 4 to 5% when we became independent. Then the government established SBI, LIC, Post Office Saving Bank, and so on. And that meant the savings rate picked up within 5 years, reached something like 8-9% of GDP. And then by 1967, it had reached 12-14% of GDP. But it was still called a low saving phase because this was the time when India's savings were quite below the mark. Normally, you would expect a country to be in a high saving phase once it starts crossing 25% of GDP, 22% of GDP. But we were a poor country, subsistence in nature, so obviously our saving capacity became that much more limited. All right, so this was the low saving phase. What did we do and why was it the low saving phase? If you will see your notes, for the first phase, I'm talking, the propensity to save in agriculture, this is the reason why we had a low saving base. और मैंने आपको दो economists के नाम दिए हैं, the two reasons identified by Ray and Bose. All right. So the two reasons identified by Ray and Bose are: one, the propensity to save in agriculture was far lesser, and the savings rate due to that would be lesser. Majority of population was in agriculture and the propensity to save in agriculture was low, and that meant that the overall savings rate remained low. Why will the propensity to save in agriculture be low? Because we were practicing mainly subsistence agriculture. There was no thinking about future output creation or accumulating assets. All those things were not in the mind. Also, if people had some surplus, that surplus was used mainly to buy land rather than for anything else. All right. And buying land was not saving. Land itself is an economic agent. Land, labor, capital, and enterprise. So buying land is not considered as a part of saving. You have read the definition. All right. So agriculture में कुछ extra आता भी था लोगों के पास, land खरीद लेते थे. All right. तो saving में count नहीं होता था. Otherwise, the surplus in agriculture itself was low, and the propensity to save was low. For those of you who don't know what is marginal propensity to save, it is the change in saving due to change in income. All right, that is marginal propensity to save. That how does your saving change with a change in income? For example, if the marginal propensity to save is say 0.8, it will mean 80% of my income I'm saving. On the other hand, if marginal propensity to save is 0.4, that means 40% of my income I am saving, and so on. So marginal propensity to save in Indian agriculture was very low. In fact, in those days it was as low as around 8-10%, which meant that if the people were earning 1 rupee, they were not even saving 10 paise out of that. All right, and since majority of us were in agriculture, it meant that overall savings remained low. And the second factor was the government could not save much because of huge developmental requirements. So we would keep running high fiscal deficits. अब एक बार फिर मैं तुम्हें याद दिलाता हूं, आप समझिएगा मेरी बात. कल मैं आपके साथ ये बात कह रहा था isn't it? Taking it from income expenditure gap. Now see, this is private saving, S. This will consist of household saving plus corporate saving. And this is government saving. So this represents the total savings that an economy will have. Understand the sequence of events again. If the total savings in the economy is larger than total investment, if the total savings in the economy is larger than total investment needs, then I will have a surplus, and that surplus will mean I can export it things abroad, or I will have exportables in my country. And exportables in my country will mean, अच्छा एक बात ऐसा समझना, before I take you further, मन में आएगा exportable कहाँ से आ गए, ये तो saving है, मैं बाहर lend करूँगा, तो आप समझिएगा मेरी बात. हमने ये कहानी शुरू की थी यहाँ से, income is equal to, और फिर अपना हेर फेर करके इसको इस इक्वेशन पे ले आए थे. अब मैं कुछ पूछता हूं, आप बताना. If I say that income will mean output also, okay on that? Isn't it? Circular flow. Whatever is my earning is my output produced, final goods and services. Now think, if my output produced in the economy is greater than my expenditure, it will mean this left-hand side will be greater than this here. And that will mean I have more output than what I need for myself, and therefore I will tend to export more and more. With me on this? So that was the idea, and that is why I told you, that therefore what used to happen was that if my output produced, my savings, etc., greater than my investment needs, I will sell more abroad. If I sell more abroad, it will mean I will have more foreign exchange reserves. And now I can use this extra money to invest more abroad, and that will give me higher inflow of domestic resources, savings more than investment, and that will give me higher inflow of foreign resources. Now remember, then you will say, sir, great, यही होता रहे तो बढ़िया है, बार बार सेविंग को इन्वेस्टमेंट से ज़्यादा करने की कोशिश करें. नहीं, आप डिफ्लेशन में चले जाएंगे अगर ये लगातार हुआ. Because you may not find enough returns for yourself, and you have created capacity. आप कैपेसिटी क्रिएट करते जा रहे हैं, लेकिन आपके लिए रिटर्न्स उतने नहीं आ रहे हैं. कहीं देखा आपने ऐसा होते हुए? China recently, what did the Chinese do? They kept growing export oriented. Japan is also a right answer. China is the recent answer, that they kept growing, export oriented. So they will create the capacity. They will have their production units, and those production units will produce things. They didn't have the demand at home, so they would sell a lot abroad, and they saved a lot, and therefore they had more capacity to lend abroad plus meet investments abroad. But now, with 2008 onwards, and especially Trump era onwards, people started becoming a little guarded against China, and the world started slowing down. So suddenly Chinese capacity to export goes down. I mean, the Chinese demand for export goes down, for Chinese export. And with the demand for Chinese export going down, now Chinese have the capacity, but they don't have place to sell. And now that makes them face deflation. You understand that? तो इसीलिए ये भी जरूरी नहीं कि आपका सेविंग लगातार इन्वेस्टमेंट से ज्यादा रहे तो लॉन्ग रन में आपके लिए अच्छा रहेगा. It's a dangerous ploy. You need to keep balancing. For some years, you can have saving more than investment, but then you will have to make sure that investment also picks up, consumption picks up, you have enough demand for your commodity. So countries have to keep moving between those two zones. That, okay, for some years I will invest a lot, but for some other years I will consume a lot, because then only my capacity that I have created will get exhausted. All right? तो कभी ये मत सोच लेना कि अच्छा सर के इक्वेशन के हिसाब से if savings are high, economy is better off. But ये definite है that if my savings go on becoming high, my investment capacity will go on becoming higher. I will have more to finance my investment. Plus, I will have more for my current account surplus. That is why we were calling it the dual gap idea. If my domestic resources are more than my domestic requirement, I have a good resource within, which will mean that I will be able to meet more of the foreign requirements. So that is the dual gap idea that we bring across. You with me on this? Okay. That is one part of the story. Now please understand, coming back to my point, 1950s India, people were poor, we were living in a subsistence world, government had a huge responsibility of unifying the country properly, developing the basic civic infrastructure, public amenities for people, even basic drinking water facilities and all were missing. So with all that, it meant that government's capacity to save would be limited. Tax obligations were not that high, as in government's capacity to collect taxes and all were not that high. Expenditures were much higher. So that became the second reason why we prevailed in a low growth phase. In the same point, I just want you to add a line in that. Same point, you write, however, in this part itself, phase 1, however, savings rate kept increasing because of institutional development by government, such that institutional development by government, such as, I said such that, you make it such as LIC, SBI, UTI, etc., along with mobilization of savings through post office, which increased savings rate of the country. And in the same thing you write, it was also helped by rising income of the time period. All right, so just to make sure that you have a completion, that yes, savings rate were low. These were the two prime reasons for savings rate being low, but there were factors that were keeping savings rate increasing. So it was increasing because of financial institutions being set up by the government and because of post office saving banks and all, and the income levels rising. But on a conscious level, there was no major thrust in any of the 5-year plans in this time period on savings promotion. All right, कोई भी 5-year plan इस टाइम पीरियड में सेविंग्स प्रमोशन पे ध्यान नहीं दे रहे थे. ऑल राइट, आप ऑनलाइन आपके एक मित्र पूछ भी रहे हैं कि ऑफलाइन वालों के पास तो बोतल गिराने की सुविधा है, हमारे लिए भी कुछ है क्या? आपके लिए तो सीधा कंट्रोल ऑल्ट डिलीट दबा देने का सुविधा. ऑल राइट, नाउ देयर इज अ क्वेश्चन दैट which I am addressing, some of you might have it in your mind, that purchase of threshers, houses, etc., or even equipments, isn't it investment? Why are we counting it as savings? Please understand this. It's saving as well as investment. When we count investment, we add them. When we count savings, we add them. Why? Because households many times don't only do financial savings. In a rural economy like ours, many times households save with assets rather than, that is real assets rather than financial assets. So in order to capture India's savings better, we add them up. Another question that can come in your mind is, why do we count jewelry as consumption and gold bar as savings? That is because gold bars are used purely for capital gains purposes. You don't wear gold bar and move along. All right. But jewelry is for ostentation purpose. All right. Jewelry का purpose ostentation है. Jewelry का purpose ornamentation है. You understand that? Gold bar का purpose ornamentation नहीं है. So we consume jewelry and we save gold bars. All right, take it as that in the mind. So that is how differentiation has been made. All right, dual gap. I hope everybody understands it now, with the explanation I gave you right now. All right. Uh, Again, one question asked is, can't the difference between saving and investment be again saved? No, if you are saving it, it's saving, no? The difference between it won't be saved. It will have to go for exports because you have already saved entirely. Another thing, I'll just take a minute. I'm using the online things to make sure that all of you also understand things. I will again repeat, when I say corporate savings, remember, corporates earn their income in terms of profit. That profit has three parts. Dividend. Dividend is the money that the corporate pays to its shareholders. Taxes, that is corporate tax that we pay to the government. And undistributed profit, which is also called retained earnings of the corporate, which is savings of the corporate. All right. So undistributed profit will qualify as savings of the corporate. All right. So dividend, taxes, and undistributed profit. That is how you should take it. No, you don't need to know the full name of Ray and Bose, don't worry. All right. If demand for exports is always there, then there will be no deflation. But imagine what risk you are taking. You are believing that foreigners will always keep demanding for you. Having that much trust on foreigners sometimes proves to be dangerous. All right. ये phase 1 के साथ आपको add करना है वेंकटेश. All right. Another thing is, what is the, I'll just take all your questions. Give me 1 second, I'll just take the questions online. What is the effect of deficit financing on dual gap? Mind you, when you do deficit financing, you are printing money to finance your fiscal deficit. In that case, you may not be borrowing, but you still have fiscal deficit nevertheless. You know what I want you to appreciate this equation as a real value equation and not nominal money value. Look at it as a real value equation. सोचो अगर ये amount हो, rupees ना हो. You understand that? 50 टमाटर बचा लिए आपने, सरकार ने 100 टमाटर टैक्स में लिए और 120 टमाटर खा गए, और उसके बाद प्राइवेट सेक्टर ने 80 टमाटर इन्वेस्ट कर दिए, तो उसका मतलब हो गया कि आपको बाकी के बचे टमाटर इंपोर्ट करने पड़ेंगे. आ गई समझ में बात टमाटर के साथ? तो ऐसे सोचना, इट्स आउटपुट, इट्स नॉट अबाउट मनी. It's like I had 50 units of a commodity saved, and I have say government has a dis-saving of 20 units of a commodity. My total resources in the markets were 30 units. On the other hand, my investment needs are 80 units. Where do I get the rest 50 units from? I will have to import. So think in real terms rather than financial terms. So how do you do deficit financing is not the concern. The concern is you have a fiscal deficit, it will add to your saving becoming lesser in the market. All right. And then there is one more that I see. That is, why don't we consider land purchased as saving? Because land is a separate factor of production. Land is not a commodity. All right, understand that. Land is not a commodity. All right, capital goods are capital goods. Investment is a capital good added. So land cannot be saving or investment. Land itself is a natural resource which we use for our own production purpose. So that is why never count land as a part of either saving or investment. I may be purchasing it for capital gains, but in economics, land will be treated as a natural resource. It can be land, it can be mountains, it can be river, it can be mines. Everything is called land in economics. अपने बेसिक्स को खूब स्ट्रांग रखो और इंट्यूशन के भरोसे नहीं, रूल्स के भरोसे चलेंगे. कोई आकर बोले 2 को 2 क्यों बोलते हैं? क्योंकि बोलते हैं. किसी ने पहले 2 को 3 बोल दिया था तो आज उसको 3 पुकार रहे थे, उसको 2 बुला रहे होते. सो वी हैव मेड सम रूल्स इन इकोनॉमिक्स. Understand that. Those rules decide what will be called as what. So you have 4 primary factors of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So land is all natural resource, labor is all workers, skilled, unskilled, etc. Capital is all machines, capital goods, and entrepreneurship is the human skill of organizing all this to run a business. So you can't mix up land with saving and investment then. All right, it's a separate ball game altogether. I again repeat, in case you missed on dual gap, if my domestic resources are larger than my domestic requirement, I will also have surplus by which I can get foreign resources. But if my domestic resources are lesser than my domestic requirement, I have a gap here, which will then lead to higher imports, which will create a gap with the foreign. So I will have a dual gap, that my domestic resource gap creates a foreign resource gap. All right, that is the basic idea over here. Yes, yes, I had some hands raised. Yes, you will. You have a trade deficit, assuming everything else remains constant, you will have a savings deficit. All right, that ways. Okay, I'll just answer one more thing, and then I'll take it. When you add physical assets in both savings and investment, how will you have double counting when the two things are on the two sides of equation? That's a question asked online. I'm trying to answer it by giving you a fundamental idea. डबल काउंटिंग का मतलब होता है एक ही चीज को दो बार काउंट करना, लेकिन जब सेविंग एक साइड है और इन्वेस्टमेंट एक साइड, तो दोनों एक दूसरे को कैंसिल करेंगे, डबल काउंट कैसे करेंगे? ऑलराइट, तो ये डाउट मन में मत रखना. डोंट कीप द डाउट दैट विल लीड टू डबल काउंटिंग. दे आर ऑन डिफरेंट साइड्स ऑफ द स्टोरी. ऑलराइट, सो you don't double count, you see them in different ways. Something that you save and something that you invest. You saved 100 rupees in the bank, saving. Bank gave that loan to a private company. Private company bought machines worth 100 rupees with it. Investment, 100 rupees saving, resulting in 100 rupees investment. You're not saying 200 saving and 200 investment now. You see that? So they will represent two different sides of the story. ये दो अलग बातें होती हैं हमारे स्टोरी के. All right. मैं फिर एक बार रिपीट कर दूं, जो लोग हिंदी में समझते हो बेहतर. ये हुई मेरी डोमेस्टिक सेविंग, ये हुआ मेरा डोमेस्टिक इन्वेस्टमेंट. अगर मेरे डोमेस्टिक सेविंग मेरे डोमेस्टिक इन्वेस्टमेंट से कम है, तो मुझे बाहर से इंपोर्ट करना पड़ेगा. इसका मतलब मुझे बाहर के फॉरेन एक्सचेंज चाहिए. तो अपने देश की सेविंग कम पड़ गई अपनी इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए, जिसकी वजह से इंपोर्ट भी करना पड़ा. तो बाहर से भी रिसोर्स की कमी पड़ गई, अब बोरोइंग करनी पड़ेगी. नतीजा क्या हुआ? एक गैप क्रिएट होगा तो दूसरा गैप भी क्रिएट होगा. ये डुअल गैप एनालिसिस है. All right? Yes, yes. You can take it one by one. Yes. Consumption. Consumption. Yes, yes. Okay. No, actually, you know what? Think like this. If I have extra savings in my economy, it means I have produced more than what is the aggregate demand in my economy, and I have now have the capacity to export that production to the outside world. All right? Yes, yes. A dual gap is a representation of twin deficit. Twin deficit means fiscal deficit leading to current account deficit, but dual gap is a larger concept. It considers not only government's fiscal deficit, it considers savings and investment gap also. All right? देखो, सेविंग को सोचो, सामान कितना है मेरे पास. अगर मेरे पास प्रोडक्शन कम हुआ, सामान कम रहे, मेरी नीड ज्यादा है, तो मुझे इंपोर्ट करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है, यहां करना चाहिए का सवाल ही नहीं आता ना, करना पड़ेगा. चारा नहीं मेरे पास, नीड है ज्यादा, उतना हम प्रोड्यूस नहीं कर पा रहे, तो वहां से इंपोर्ट आती है की बात आती है. Did I hear, sir? I keep hearing it. Yes, yes. Gold for a? That is intermediate good, as I told you. No, why? I gave you example as a tomato. I could have said onion, I could have said anything. Commodity example देना चाह रहा था. उसको दिल से क्यों लगा रहे हो? मैं टमेटो मतलब ये नहीं कह रहा था सिर्फ टमेटो, मैं कह रहा था जीडीपी ऑफ अ कंट्री रियल टर्म्स. जब तुम बोलते हो इनकम इज इक्वल टू एक्सपेंडिचर, मनी थोड़ी बोलते हो, रियल इनकम और रियल एक्सपेंडिचर बोलते हो ना. यू अंडरस्टैंड दैट? जो मैं तुम्हें पढ़ा रहा हूं, इसके बदले मुझे मनी मिलेगा, लेकिन जो इनकम क्रिएट हो रही है वो अभी के अभी क्रिएट हो रही है जब मैं तुम्हें पढ़ा रहा हूं. इट्स अ रियल आउटपुट बीइंग प्रोड्यूस्ड. यू अंडरस्टैंड दैट? तो ये रियल आउटपुट की बात करता है. जैसे टमाटर बोल दो, पढ़ाई बोल दो, खीरा बोल दो, काजू बोल दो, कुछ भी बोल दो, है तो रियल आउटपुट। तो ये मत सोचो कि इसको इन्वेस्टमेंट क्यों माने या ना माने, उसी में से कुछ बातें इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए यूज होंगी। जो सरप्लस रिसोर्स क्रिएट करोगे वही, मशीन कहां से आते हैं, कहीं सरप्लस रिसोर्स को प्रोड्यूस किए ना मशीन। तो मैक्रो सोचो, मैंने टमाटर एग्जांपल दिया जस्ट टू टेल यू कि अच्छा देखो, एक कमोडिटी के टर्म्स में अगर सोचोगे तो क्लियर हो जाएगा कि अगर मेरे कमोडिटी के अमाउंट प्रोड्यूस्ड इन माय इकोनॉमी इज लेसर देन व्हाट आई एम यूजिंग, देन दैट विल मीन आई विल हैव टू इंपोर्ट इट फ्रॉम अब्रॉड। ठीक है, दैट इज द आइडिया। But on a macro level, you take the total, no? You don't take particular commodities. All right? Yes, yes. No, no, that is the problem. That the real value may not be matched by the price and vice versa. I had written this article, I think 7-8 years back, that ideally value should create price, but unfortunately in the modern world, price is creating value. तो ये समझना जरूरी है। मैं कैसा पढ़ाता हूं उससे डिसाइड होना चाहिए कि आप मुझे कितना वैल्यू देंगे। बट मैं प्राइसी कितना हूं, अगर उससे मेरी वैल्यू होने लगी तो लोग प्राइसी हो जाते हैं। हमने तो आजकल उसका एक नया नाम भी ढूंढा है, इनमें एटीट्यूड बहुत है। ये भूल जाते हैं, वो एरोगेंस कहते हैं उसको, वो मूर्खता होती है। बट एनीवेज दैट इज द आइडिया। ऑल राइट, नॉट पॉसिबल टू फाइंड इट। यस यस रोहित। Yes, there is. So, you know what? Equipments are investment, and investments are financed by savings. So, when you count equipment, etc., it doesn't create any kind of an imbalance. But land, labor, entrepreneurs are not commodities. You see that? They are either naturally existing or human element. And therefore, we don't take them while counting saving and investment. Expansion of? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. You can think like that. They can't be expanded. It has to be human effort. And when you do more effort. That is why, economics doesn't even recognize in its basic sense, the term human capital. You see that's taken still as labor. All right, that kind of a thing. All right. Yes, जब इनकम बढ़ती है, सब्सिस्टेंस नीड मीट होने लग जाए, लोग सेव उसके बाद करने लग जाते हैं। हमारी इनकम बढ़ने लगी आज़ादी के बाद, थोड़े सब्सिस्टेंस नीड मीट होने लगे तो सेविंग्स भी थोड़ी बढ़ने लगी। ठीक है, दैट इज द आइडिया। नो, more savings will lead to more investment. One element saves and the other element invests. When you will save, I'll borrow from you and buy this digital board. So I invested. You understand that? All right, now see this. Yes, it was increasing, but it was increasing from a very low level, so it still remained low in spite of increasing. Yeah, absolutely. Anything above, I mean, in today's India, anything above 30%. Those days, at least 20%. Yeah. जो कमोडिटीज है ना, वही वैल्यू क्रिएट करती है। नहीं, वो सर्विसेज में भी ट्रू होंगी, क्योंकि सर्विसेज भी रियल वैल्यू है। मैं तुम्हें पढ़ा रहा हूं ना, तो कुछ रियल वैल्यू क्रिएट हो रही है, मजाक तो हुआ नहीं। वही तो कंजम्पशन में काउंट होता है। क्यों? जैसे बैंकिंग इंपोर्ट करते हैं, जब कोई हमारा आईपीएल बाहर देखता है, वो हमारी सर्विस इंपोर्ट कर रहा है। जब कोई टूरिस्ट मेरे यहाँ आके दर्शन करता है इधर उधर, वो हमारी सर्विस इंपोर्ट कर रहा है। जब हमारे यहाँ के लोग इंटरनेट से कनेक्ट हो, जब मैं एमआईटी को लेक्चर देता हूँ, वो इंपोर्ट कर रहे हैं मेरी सर्विस। अभी परसों रात को ही दे रहा था। You know, I was lecturing them at MIT. They were importing my service. You understand that? All right, yes. वो डायनेमिक वर्ल्ड में होगा, ये स्टैटिक वर्ल्ड है, ठीक है, ओवर द पीरियड ऐसा हो. इसीलिए मैंने कहा दैट यू नीड टू बैलेंस योर कंजम्पशन एंड इन्वेस्टमेंट. इफ आई फोकस ओनली ऑन इन्वेस्टमेंट देन आई विल नॉट हैव इनफ टू कंज्यूम and that may then decline my investment also. And if I focus only on consumption, I may not have invested sufficiently, and that might curtail my capacity to consume also. So I got to keep a balance between the two. ठीक है? As in, I couldn't follow. No, no, everything that you are saving will end up becoming an investment. That is the circular flow idea. As I told you, that whatever money you save, some corporate will be using it or government will be using it to create a capital good, no? Understand that. Whatever you deliberately save or you are forced to save, the taxes, then government uses those taxes to make a road. So your saving used for investment. You understand that? That is the relation between saving and investment. At end of the day, that is what you call leakages and injections into a system. So anything that comes into my system will find itself an alternative. All right. Now see, the second phase started 1968-69 and continued till 75-76. This is called initial years of, it is of increase in savings rate. वो if लिखा हुआ है आपके notes में, आप उसे off कर लो. Initial years of increase in savings rate. Now, you know, by the time we reached the end of this time period, we had 19% savings in the economy, and out of this 19%, 12% was by households. That meant majority of savings in India was being done by households in these days. Again, government was dissaving, we had a fiscal deficit. So fiscal deficit means government is saving negative. Households and corporates were saving positive. All right, but out of 19%, 12% saving was by households. Again, we go into the reason as to why this happened, how come savings rate increased in this time period. One was with Green Revolution, income of the farmers started rising, and that gave high savings increase. All right, so rural India started saving. The second was increase in household income that happened thereafter due to high government expenditure. Government was spending more in the market, more people recruited by the government, more demand created by the government. So high government expenditure was creating high savings possibility due to the multiplier effect of income. So even though income level was not rising very fast, but now with government spending more and demanding more, people had more propensity to earn formally. समझना इस बात को. Formal income बढ़ने लगी क्योंकि सरकार खर्च करने लगे. तो जब सरकार खर्च करते हैं, फॉर्मल इनकम बढ़ने लग जाती है, तो फॉर्मल सेविंग्स रिकॉर्डिंग भी बढ़ने लग जाती है. As formal income becomes more, formal savings calculation also become more. Formal means on record through registered entities. So our savings record also started showing a positive. And the third reason I have given you is that with nationalization of commercial branches, banks, and increasing number of branches all over India, again savings could be mobilized faster. All right, we had more branches in underdeveloped states of India with the nationalization. We had more branches in rural India with nationalization. So saving which was lying idle here now got mobilized. You understand that? And that again showed higher savings rate in the period 68-69 to 75-76. In fact, it further continued between 75-76 to 78-79. Remember, Mrs. Gandhi, for all her flaws, had a vision about developing an India which had a lot of infrastructure provision, etc. All right, I mean, I see a lot of Mrs. Gandhi in Mr. Modi. लॉन्ग टर्म की बातें करते हैं ये लोग, अच्छी बात भी करते हैं, ये नेता की अच्छे नेता की निशानी होती है. अब लॉन्ग टर्म की जब बात करें, अब खराबी तब आ जाती है जब आप लॉन्ग टर्म इतना आगे देखने लग जाते हैं कि यहाँ पे पिटफॉल है वो नहीं देख के उसमें चले जाए. यू अंडरस्टैंड दैट? कि मैं उतने दूर का देख रहा हूँ, हाँ मैं बस पहुँचने वाला हूँ, तुम तक आ रहा हूँ और यहाँ धड़ाम से गिर जाऊँ. तो पहुंचने में और डिले हो जाएगा. So this is a challenge we have at times. Mrs. Gandhi also could not see the near-term pitfalls and would go further, but she was a lot bent on infrastructure development, saving mobilization, institution building. बहुत चीजें हुई 70s में इंडिया में, जैसे कोल इंडिया लिमिटेड being created, भारत हेवी इलेक्ट्रिकल्स लिमिटेड being created, among industrialization part. Similarly, giving more teeth to LIC to mobilize more funds, nationalization of banks, preceded by creating priority sector lending, lead bank scheme. So there was a lot of schemes going on, and they were definitely helping savings generation in India. So 76, 75, 76 to 78, 79. Again, I need you to write something over there. In phase 3, if you could write, in this time period, savings rate reached 21% of GDP by 1978-79. By 1978-79, which was very high corresponding to India's per capita GDP level. At any level of per capita GDP, you would expect a certain level of savings. Like as country is rich, you expect it to save more. If it is relatively poor, you expect it to save less. Considering our per capita income, our savings rate were pretty high. जिस लेवल पे हमारा पर कैपिटा इनकम था, उस लेवल के हिसाब से हमारे सेविंग्स रेट काफी ज्यादा थे. All right, like normally at our level of per capita income, countries did not have savings rate beyond 10-11%. But India had worked hard, and at our per capita income, we were having it at 20-21%. All right, so that was an achievement again in that sense that our savings rate were going high. And again I repeat, mobilization of saving was high. सेविंग रेट बढ़ रहा था क्योंकि सरकार एक्टिव कोशिश कर रहे थे सेविंग को मोबिलाइज करने की. मैं फिर एक बात बता देता हूं, और आप जो भी लोग सेविंग इन्वेस्टमेंट में कंफ्यूज फील करते हो, आपको जरूर एनसीईआरटी पढ़नी चाहिए, मैक्रो और सर्कुलर फ्लो का कंसेप्ट पढ़ना चाहिए. वो नहीं पढ़े हो इसीलिए दुखी हो, ठीक है, उसको पढ़ना चाहिए जरूर. जब मैं बार बार बोलता, आपको याद होगा जब अगर आप मेरे सेमिनार्स भी अटेंड करते थे तो मैं बार बार बोलता था कि मैं एक्सपेक्ट करता हूं आप एनसीईआरटी पढ़े होगे. मैं वही एक्सपेक्ट, मैं कोई रॉकेट साइंस नहीं बोल रहा आपसे, बट अगर आप एनसीईआरटी नहीं पढ़े रहोगे ना तो ये रॉकेट साइंस लगेगा आपको, ये समझिएगा. तो एनसीईआरटी पढ़ो, अगर नहीं पढ़े हो तो स्पेशली वो लोग जो इकोनॉमिक्स में नए हो, दोज हु आर न्यू टू इकोनॉमिक्स एंड यू रिफ्रेन from reading even the NCERT of economics, then you are unnecessarily creating trouble for yourself. So don't let that happen. फिर समझना इस बात को, circular flow ये बड़ा normal तरीके से बताता है that you will either consume or save your income, and you will either consume or invest, assuming a two-sector economy, household and firms. So if you are in equilibrium, saving will match investment. If you are in equilibrium, if you introduce government in that sector, then government will collect taxes and government will do expenditure. That is why T minus G. So if government collects taxes as much as it spends, then again you need saving to be same as investment because they become source of each other. You understand that? अब जब आप बोलते हो ना कि मैंने घर खरीदा, ये घर खरीद को रेंट पे लगा दिया, I buy a house, I put it on rent, is this saving on investment? It's both. I gave you the definition of saving, all construction part of saving, and housing is a part of investment. You understand that? And that is why saving will match investment, no? If I don't consider it as both, how will saving match investment? And rent is the income generated from the investment that you did. The way when you invest in a digital board, you earn income by teaching. You invest in or you save in a financial asset, you earn interest and as your income. So every saving will generate some interest income flow. Every investment will generate an income flow because they are adding to production capacity of the economy. You understand that? तो बस दिमाग को थोड़ा चलाते रहोगे अच्छे से और दिमाग में ये रखोगे कि इंट्यूशन पे नहीं जाना, रूल बोला जा रहा है। क्यों, अगर मान लो इंट्यूशन पे ही दुनिया चल रही होती तो लिख के क्यों देता आपको कि सेविंग में क्या इंक्लूड होता है? फिर बोलता कि जैसे जिसकी श्रद्धा है मान लेना सेविंग। ऐसी बात होती है ना भाई, अपने अपने श्रद्धा के हिसाब से सेविंग मान लेना। वो तो नहीं कह रहा मैं। आई एम सेइंग दैट देयर इज अ रूल, दिस इज सेविंग एंड दिस इज नॉट सेविंग। सो व्हाटएवर इज सेट एज अ रूल एज सेविंग, you have to think in those terms that okay, these are the things that sir has classified in the notes, these are my savings. In economics it will be very important because it's based on rule subject, and that's what makes it easier. You just have to remember it once. So once the rules are remembered, life is easy after that. But honestly, I'm telling you, I have sometimes people who are my friends who tell me, oh, I love economics, it's very commonsensical. I feel like giving them all my statistics, econometrics and maths book, trying to ask them find common sense in this. You know, it's all technical training. Understand that. It needs, like any subject, it needs common sense. Every subject needs that. But if somebody says, I have common sense, I understand economics, no, you are confusing intuition with common sense. With intuition, you don't understand this subject. By knowing the rules, by going through them, by having respect of continuously revising them, then you start understanding the subject in and out. Believe you me on this. Subject will never be a challenge. But respect for the subject is very important, that I need to go about it again and again. I need to respect the rules I have learnt at one place so that I don't get confused at the other place. अभी तो माइक्रो मैक्रो में आप देखेंगे मॉडल्स आएंगे, और जब आप ऐसे बोलते हैं ना, कभी कभी मुझे मेरे एक स्टूडेंट की याद दिलाते हैं। वो अमेरिका में थे, एनकोनो नाम था उनका, अफ्रीका के थे। वो मुझसे भी 4 इंच लंबे थे और तगड़े तो जितना मैं अभी हूं उसके भी 1.5 गुना थे। So I used to be 30 kg lighter than this, you know, in those days. This fellow would get up suddenly in the middle of a micro discussion. Sir, I don't understand this. I come from a poor country, Uganda. Even there we save. Look, even now my pocket has saving. How are you assuming budget line is PXX plus PYY is equal to M? How come there is no saving over here? I cannot do this class, sir. Who had the guts to tell him, no, you will have to sit? Your wish, go. You know, so this fellow gets reminded because he just couldn't follow that it's a model we are doing, and the models have their own rules. That is why we call them models. And only when you learn the basic models that we start dropping those assumptions and then take you to the real world. So you can't jump to the real world unless you don't know the basic assumptions. You understand that? So that is why econometrics आप में से बहुत लोग पढ़े हो। शुरुआत में क्या पढ़ते हो? Classical linear regression model पढ़ते हो with so many assumptions. And then what do we start doing? We start dropping those assumptions. Multicollinearity, heteroscedasticity, autocorrelation. तो ये assumption अब पहले ही शुरू में ही तुम्हें autocorrelation बताते। तो फिर क्या बोलते तुम? पता नहीं कैसी बातें कर रहा है। यह कोरिलेशन कहाँ था जो ऑटो कोरिलेशन आया? तो हर चीज ना स्टेप्स में जाती है, वो आपको समझना होगा। दैट अगर आप रियल वर्ल्ड देखना चाहते हो तो अच्छी बात है, बट द रियल वर्ल्ड विल बी अंडरस्टूड ओनली व्हेन यू नो द थ्योरी एंड देन वी ड्रॉप द assumptions and get closer to the real world. All right, that will be the method in every subject. Economics is nothing different. We'll do like that. All right, just to सेविंग इज अ प्रोपोर्शन ऑफ इनकम। तुम अपने इनकम से क्या क्या करते हो मुझे बताओ? कपड़े वपड़े खरीदते हो, डिस्कोथिक जाते हो, पार्टी करते हो, जो बच गया उसे क्या बोलते हो? सेविंग। ऐसे सेविंग इज अ पार्ट ऑफ इनकम। Saving rate was increasing, not the absolute saving. So if my income is 100 rupees today and my savings rate is 10%, I am saving 10 rupees out of 100. If my income rises to 150 tomorrow, my savings rate can rise to 12%, and my consumption can also rise, my savings can also rise. You see that? So that is a possibility. All right. Then came the next phase, and the next phase was one, ab sunna meri baat ye dhyan se, be careful here. The next phase we call it as a stagnation, because at the end of this time period, if you recall, I told you 78, 79, we had 21% savings. All right? By 84-85, the savings rate had come down to 20.2%. तो जितना सेविंग्स 1978-79 में था, percentage of GDP saved became lesser. All right, so you can just write that by 1984-85, savings rate was 20.2%. All right, 20.2%. I will tell you something here. This was nothing but a normal correction. Earlier there was excessive savings. It had to be corrected. I'll tell you how. Government savings started declining as we started becoming slightly more disciplined. We didn't print money as much as what we did in 70s. I was telling you the story yesterday, I hope you would recall. So we didn't print the money as much as we were doing in 70s. We were not manipulating the numbers anymore, which meant the government borrowings will rise, so dis-saving will rise. जो फिस्कल डेफिसिट नहीं दिखता था सरकार का, अब दिखने लगा क्योंकि पैसे छाप के अपने खर्चे पूरे करने कम किए सरकार ने. You understand that? So now the fiscal deficit was more observed, borrowings rate looked higher, dis-saving of the government looked higher. Also, the performance of public sector enterprises was pretty poor by now. So public sector enterprises had become loss-making rather than profit-making. They further put pressure on government's budget to get funded every year. Do I reach you on this last line? I'm just repeating myself in Hindi. मैंने ये कहा कि जो public sector enterprises थे, ये ज़्यादा नुकसान में जाने लगे, और नुकसान में जाने लगे तो इनका नुकसान की भरपाई कौन करेगा? सरकार का बजट. If the public sector enterprise runs into a loss, who will pay for that loss? Budget of the government. That became the next challenge. That now the savings of the government started declining. Another change that happened was 80s brought in television. 80s brought in more development of consumer goods in rural areas. So 80s brought in a lot of consumerism. There was a drastic change between 70s and 80s, mind you. The way we had a drastic change between 90s and 2000s. Drastic change in India. You know, drastic means which is more than trend change. Trend se zyada jab change aaye. So till 70s, eating outside was not such a common thing. Till 70s, imagine, okay, I'll give you some examples. So all these things that you see today, chips and Maggi and tomato ketchup and so on, started becoming very popular by 80s. And there was a reason. The spread of green revolution and white revolution, beginning of yellow revolution, was making rural areas prosperous, comparatively of course. So more money was coming in here, more aspirations were coming into demand, people were getting better informed. You know, then television and radio were playing their own roles with advertisements reaching the people, and that was creating consumerism in India. What is consumerism? Your position in society to some extent will be dependent or decided by your consumer orientation. You understand that? तो वो consumerism होता है. आप अभी भी गांव जाइए तो आप देखेंगे बहुत सारे, like if I recall my grandfather, he retired as a decently placed person, but if I recall my grandfather, you know, he, after his retirement, more often I would not see him in even a proper shirt. He would be wearing those vests, and he would be wearing a dhoti, and he would be moving around in the village all over the ground. Maximum in winters there will be a shawl. You know, so nobody could have said that he was a retired bureaucrat, retired at some decent level. So, you know, वो consumerism नहीं था उस समय में उतना, नहीं ध्यान देते थे. लेकिन शहर में आप ऐसे नहीं रहते थे, आज भी नहीं रहते. तो ये फर्क आने लगा 70s के 80s के इंडिया में. Rise in consumerism means your demand will rise and your saving capacity will become lesser. So many things that households used to save earlier, now the consumption part became dominant. Another thing, I'll just take 1 minute, I'll just explain this to you and you can ask me. Another thing was that apart from household and government, corporate savings came down now because government, if you recall 1980s, the government was liberalizing, giving more opportunities to corporate to spend money, buy new machines, and create more capacity. So corporates who used to keep more undistributed savings now started using this for buying more future capacity creation, which meant that they started borrowing rather than saving for future. पहले corporate क्या करते थे? Profit आया, profit save करके रख लिए कि future में use करेंगे. अब कॉर्पोरेट क्या कर रहे थे, प्रॉफिट आया उसे तो यूज कर ही रहे थे, साथ में बैंक से भी बोरो करने लगे कि मैं अपने खर्चे और बढ़ाता हूं, एक्सपैंड करता हूं, सो दैट ज्यादा प्रोड्यूस करूंगा. So earlier when corporates used to save, it got recorded as saving in India. But now what were corporates doing? They were not only using their savings for expansion, they were even borrowing from the market for expansion, which implied that corporate savings in net terms became a negative value. There were more borrowings rather than savings by corporate. So that meant the expansion of India in 80s, backed by high fiscal deficit, backed by consumerism of households with more demand, and backed by corporate culture of expansion quickly, meant that our savings rate became stagnant, rather came down slightly. आप लोग समझ रहे हैं मेरी इस बात को? ठीक है, मैं फिर से बस हिंदी में रिपीट कर रहा हूं. 3 कारण रहे. पहला, कॉर्पोरेट ने अपनी सेविंग्स कम कर दी क्योंकि वो एक्सपेंशन करने लगे. दूसरा, हाउस की सेविंग कम हो गई क्योंकि कंज्यूमरिज्म बढ़ने लगा, लोग ज्यादा चीजें खरीदने लगे. और तीसरा, कंज्यूमरिज्म हिंदी में भौतिकतावाद कहते हैं उसे. और तीसरा, देयर वाज अ राइज ऑफ गवर्नमेंट डेफिसिट, फिस्कल डेफिसिट, क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट ने पैसे छापने की जगह बोरोइंग से अपने खर्चे पूरे करने लगे, और नतीजा ये रहा कि ओवरऑल सेविंग्स रेट थोड़ा कम दिखने लगा. यस यस. Stagnation compared to where we were last time. So 78, 79 we were at 21%. 84, 85 we are at 20%. No change in savings rate, no? That's stagnation. All right, that is the idea. All right, then 85, 86 to 92, 93 is called the phase of recovery, because by the time we reach 92, 93, we reach 22.4% of GDP as saving. By the time we reach 92, 93, we reach 22.8% as the at 4% as the rate of saving. How come it increased so much? One, it increased because stock market expanded. So now many people were buying shares, many people were issuing debentures and buying debentures. Debentures are a financial asset that get created. So now more people in shares, more people in debentures. So saving mobilization again started picking up. If you recall, I was telling you while talking about reasons for revival and in services sector also, that we liberalized the stock market after 1985. You would recollect that? That became a factor of mobilizing savings. The second factor that savings got mobilized was mutual fund industry, and other savings tool. They were now spreading to rural areas, even insurance. All right, people were spreading. Like 50s 60s का समय खतरनाक था. अगर आप एक LIC एजेंट थे तो कभी कभी लोग आपको पीटने लगते थे. कि आप किसी के घर जाते थे, उनको बोलते थे मान लीजिए आपके घर में किसी का देहांत हो जाए, बस उन्होंने पकड़ के पीटना शुरू कर दिया, ऐसे कैसे देहांत हो जाएगा, क्या बेचने आए हो. बट बाय 80s पीपल वर वाइजर. They knew that 50s and 60s days were different. People would hit you for selling an insurance. But by 80s, people wanted insurance. They needed insurance. There was better information. Similarly, mutual fund was a new thing in India by then now. Like people had understood that, okay, good returns can be made by putting my money in mutual fund. In case you don't know what is a mutual fund, you don't worry. We will teach you that. Right now, you just stick to the idea. So mutual fund industry started growing, and that again meant more savings could be mobilized. In fact, financial savings became very dominant and have remained dominant in India after 1980s. पहले तो equipment, expenditure, housing ये ज़्यादा dominant होते थे, and financial savings will be less dominant. Now financial savings in terms of shares, fixed deposits, debentures, etc. have become more dominant, and equipments, etc. have become लेस डोमिनेंट. डोमिनेंट का मतलब अगर 100 रुपए की सेविंग हो रही है देश में, तो 80 रुपए 90 रुपए फाइनेंशियल सेविंग्स हो रहे, 10 रुपए हाउसिंग एक्सेट्रा एंड इक्विपमेंट्स के टर्म में है. पहले ऐसा नहीं होता था. पहले 100 रुपए में से 40 50 60 हाउसिंग और 30 40 फाइनेंशियल सेविंग होती थी. I'm just repeating myself in English. Earlier savings would be done more in equipments, construction, etc., and less in terms of financial savings. Now it's the opposite. Now more financial savings, less of real savings. So this trend started in 1980s. Then the other factor that created was increase in corporate saving due to high profitability. Corporates started making more profit, and corporate savings started rising thereafter. All right, so increase in corporate saving due to high profitability. And one more factor you please add, fourth point. Fourth point you add, faster growth of 1980s faster growth of 1980s also contributed to high savings rate. All right, I have a question online that what do we mean by mobilizing savings? इकट्ठा करना saving को. Collecting savings from people. You can have money in the pocket, but you're not putting it in the bank because there is no bank. So if I create a bank, you just might put it in the bank. All right, if I create a post office possibility, you might just put it over there. That is mobilizing savings. Also remember, when I say government expenditure increase resulted in creating household income or savings, that was because government expenditure increase creates the multiplier effect. I hope you would recall the multiplier effect story. And multiplier effect increases income level for people, in turn pushing the savings rate. All right. Now this is on savings that happened till 92-93. In fact, 1992-93, India's savings rate, again, was one of the higher ones according to those days. In fact, अभी मैंने आगे आपको नहीं दिया, but by 1994-95, we were touching 25% of GDP as savings. And that was a hallmark for India that, okay, India is saving so much. But again, things change. In fact, by 2007-8, we had touched 35% as savings rate. But then it went down after 2007-8. It came down to 28% by 2018-19. Today now again we are touching 30-31% as savings, which is a welcome sign that the more we save, more we can invest thing. But India after 92, we will be discussing it, and I will give you a trend variable again. But this was savings in India till 92. On investment, I will give you a write-up. I'll keep discussing with you and keep giving you the write-up. Before I do that, I want you to know again that what is meant by investment. इसकी मीनिंग क्या है ये समझ ले. एक और नाम होता है इसका कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन. इन्वेस्टमेंट और कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन. Gold bar is just saving. Don't bother about financial or equipment. It's normally taken as financial saving, Harshit, but just saving. Consumerism relates to relative income hypothesis. Sayani, I'm answering your question. Shayoni, sorry. I hope, Sukhmeen, you got your answer. Service sector growth was one reason for savings, but not the only reason. I see one more question, that if we had low savings in the first 5-year plan, why did we go for Harrod Dormer? That's why. The idea was mobilize savings and go by growth, because unless you don't save high, you won't grow good. All right, savings low थे, इसीलिए हमारा ध्यान इस बात पे था कि savings को rate को बढ़ाया जाए. All right, so that we can mobilize more savings and grow faster. All right, in fact, remember one more thing also. This was the dominant theme of 1950s and 40s, the classical growth model, that countries which save more are countries which grow faster. All right, that was a dominant theme in the mind of people. Later on, people realized that saving is an important factor, but you need other things like skill development or structural reforms, good infrastructure, etc., to grow faster. All right, so that is how economy has evolved. All right. Yes, saving mobilization is how do you collect the saving that is moving around. I can have saving in my pocket. How do you make sure that I get it out of my pocket and put it in the bank? Is mobilizing savings. Mobilize करने का मतलब होता है किसी भी चीज को इकट्ठा करना. तो एक जगह इकट्ठा कैसे करेंगे? हो सकता है मैं कंज्यूम इसलिए कर रहा हूं, मुझे पता ही नहीं मैं सेव कर सकता हूं. और मैं हमेशा इसीलिए बोलता हूं कि हमारे स्कूल सिस्टम में फाइनेंशियल ट्रेनिंग एक इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट बनना चाहिए. Many in India are consuming because they don't know what to do with their money. So they're consuming. Nobody has trained them into saving. They don't realize that they will go old one day. They don't realize that as kids will grow up, the expenditures will rise. People think everything is same, it will remain the same. There is no understanding of inflation. That if I'm earning 1 lakh rupees today, that 1 lakh rupees today won't be 1 lakh rupees 10 years later. People think, no, I will keep earning. Like, somehow the thinking is not there because the training is not there. So you need to mobilize savings by training people, creating institutions. जैसे एक मैं एग्जांपल देता हूँ, वो एडवर्टाइजमेंट आता है ना, जब MS धोनी आते हैं, सचिन तेंदुलकर आते हैं, बोलते हैं म्यूचुअल फंड सही है. ये सेविंग मोबिलाइज करने का तरीका हुआ. That you have two icons coming up and saying mutual fund is great. Now then you are kind of incentivizing many people that okay, let's at least take interest in what is mutual fund. You know, so that is why I say that if from school days we are taught what is the relevance of saving and when can you save the best and what is the stage of life in which you should save in which manner, then by the time we have graduated out, we have some basic idea, at least knowledge is there. Now whether we save or not is at least a choice. But when you don't even have a knowledge, then it's not even a choice, it's ignorance. Understand that. मुझे तैरना नहीं आता तो मैं डूब के मर गया, ये मेरी चॉइस नहीं थी. You know, तैरना आता और फिर डूब के मर गया, वो शायद चूज किया, अच्छा नहीं अब जीने की इच्छा खत्म हो गई है, पानी आ रहा है, गिर जाऊं. पर अगर तैरना ही नहीं आता और पानी बढ़ने लगा और मैं चिल्लाने लगूं C+I+G+NX, उससे तो पानी नीचे नहीं जाएगा. Problem is that. That is why I say that school should give us some basic training of life, swimming, financial management, teamwork. We should be taught all this in our school so that as we grow up, we learn how to appreciate and do things around. You know, अब देखेंगे, मैं आज अभी आपसे पहले GS की क्लास ले रहा था, वहां भी ये कह रहा था, कभी कभी हम बोलते हैं ये करने में सरकार का क्या फायदा है. सोचो, माइंड की ट्रेनिंग ही नहीं है कि सरकार फायदे के लिए नहीं होती, देश के भले के लिए होती है. ये कॉमन क्वेश्चन सुनता हूं मैं, व्हाई शुड द गवर्नमेंट डू इट, व्हाट इज द प्रॉफिट फॉर द गवर्नमेंट, व्हाई शुड गवर्नमेंट थिंक अबाउट प्रॉफिट, गवर्नमेंट इज मेंट फॉर वेलफेयर ऑफ द पीपल. That is why people pay taxes to the government, assuming that they will do welfare out of that. If the government starts thinking about profit, where will welfare go then? But we see this language commonly said because this is how we have been made to think. That all welfare is about earning profit or becoming better off. That is the challenge. So if we can train our people in that, that is again mobilizing people or mobilizing things. The savings rate will remain low if you don't mobilize it well, and sometimes you will see people doing unnecessary expenditure rather than saving the money. Like I expect that at least by the time your generation grows up and reaches an age, at least you guys will start giving gold bonds as gift than gold jewelry. You know, otherwise it's an unnecessary expenditure. You understand that? Show off के लिए जब लोग खर्च करते हैं, तो वो क्यों कर रहे हैं? उनको पता ही नहीं अब करना क्या है इस पैसे का. और कुछ लोगों को देखोगे शो ऑफ के लिए खर्च किए, खूब सारा खर्च किए, लोग दुनिया उनको अमीर समझ रही है, अचानक एक दिन धराशायी पाए जा रहे हैं, बैंकरप्सी रिपोर्ट कर रहे हैं. ऐसा क्यों हुआ उनके साथ? क्योंकि उन्होंने मैनेज नहीं किया खुद के सेविंग्स को ठीक से. You understand that? That is the challenge we face by lack of training. So mobilization of saving will work on training of people, creation of institutions, making sure you incentivize people to come to the institution, put their money into that. That is mobilization. Problem is then it is not saving at all. That is the problem. You will calculate it as saving when it becomes saving, no? All right. Okay, now see. Phase 4 में, हाँ, नहीं, अगर ग्रोथ रेट बढ़ेगा तो सेविंग्स रेट को बढ़ना ही चाहिए ना. अरे इंडिया जैसी कंट्री में तो एक्सपेंशन का स्कोप ही आज भी है, वो जमाना छोड़ो. बोरोइंग करके कर रहे थे और फेज 5 में कॉर्पोरेट प्रॉफिट्स बढ़ने लगी. अगर एक्सपैंड भी करेंगे, अगर मेरी प्रॉफिट, अब ऐसा समझो ये मेरे पास केक है और मेरी जरूरत ये है, तो बोरो करना पड़ेगा और केक का साइज ये हो जाए तो एक्सपैंड कर सकता हूं बिना बोरो किए हुए. ये कहानी है, ठीक है? यस यस. प्रॉफिट ज्यादा होने का कॉम्पिटिटिव होने से कोई खास संबंध नहीं था. प्रॉफिट तो कैप्टिव मार्केट में भी ज्यादा होगा। जब मार्केट में कंपटीशन नहीं है, मैं ही हूं, तो प्रॉफिट ज्यादा कमा लूंगा। साथ में सरकार ने लिबरलाइज कर दी थी पॉलिसीज को, बिजनेस फ्रेंडली रिफॉर्म्स ऑफ 80s। वही तो अभी समझा रहा था कि अगर तुम्हारी प्रॉफिट ज्यादा हो रही है तो रिसोर्सेज हैं वो लाने के लिए, बोरो क्यों करोगे फिर? बोरो तो तब करोगे जब रिसोर्सेज की कमी होगी ना। ठीक है, ऑल राइट। नाउ सी, व्हेन वी यूज द वर्ड इन्वेस्टमेंट और कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन, इट कंसिस्ट्स ऑफ business fixed investment, these are all productive assets of firms to be used for further production, like machines, factories, etc. This is one part of investment. All right, business fixed investment. One part of investment, which is business fixed investment. Then the second part is residential construction investment. This refers to all expenditure on housing by household. All expenditure by housing on household. All the new construction that we purchase, the flats, etc., that we purchase, that is residential construction investment. All right. Then comes public investment. This is all investment by government. Public investment, which is all investment by government. And then comes, so all investment by government will be roads that the government constructs, or the factories that the government constructs, or school buildings that the government constructs, Panchayati Raj buildings that the government constructs. Everything will be a part of government investment. All right. And then inventory investment. This inventory investment consists of change in stock. Inventory investment consists of change in stock. All right. So this is closing stock. That is the amount of a commodity that you have on 31st March, all right, on a day, minus opening stock. It's like the amount you are closing the year with and the amount you started the year with. It's like if I start with 10 units of a commodity in the year and I end with 20, my change in stock is plus 10. Similarly, it can be minus 500, 20, any number, but it is the closing stock, stock of a commodity that I have at the end of the year, minus stock of the commodity with which I started the year. Which commodities? So what we do here in inventory investment, we take all change in stock of finished goods, semi-finished goods, and raw material. So first thing considered is that all change in stock of finished goods, semi-finished goods. So finished goods are those goods which are now completed, like say a completely made shirt, a completely made chair, finished goods. Semi-finished goods can be say a half-built metro, a half-built flyover, all right, or an unstitched shirt. That's a semi-finished good. Raw material, of course, will be the commodities which have not yet been processed. All right, अभी उनको processing में नहीं डाला गया, वो raw material की तरह रखे हुए, say an iron ore or a coal or cotton which is not yet converted into cloth. All right, that is a raw material. Then B, all stock of precious metals like gold and silver. That's another thing which is measured. All stocks of precious metals like gold and silver. And then C, all change in livestock. Cattle, camel, donkeys, horses, everything. All right, so all changes in livestock. All right, इन तीनों को जब आप ऐड करते हो तो मिलता है इन्वेंट्री इन्वेस्टमेंट और चेंज इन स्टॉक. So we have business fixed investment, we have residential construction investment, we have public investment, and we have inventory investment. And inventory investment will consist of stock of finished goods, semi-finished goods, raw material, stock of precious metals like gold and silver, and stock of livestock or change in livestock. Yes, the term inventory looks like that, but inventory is not necessarily of the firm's inventory only. We are looking at macroeconomy level. All right. Is inventory. You have inventory of even humans in a system. Then there will be no change in stock. Yes, yes. Yes. Oh, I thought you were asking a question. All right. I can believe we are in sync till here. Now, what was the trend? Yes, yes. No, no. I can begin life with 10 kg of cement, and by the end of next year, I may have 5 kg left. Or I may have produced more, and by the end of next year, I have 15 kg left. Not necessary for them to match, no? Financial year, 1st April to 31st March. All right. Now see, trend-wise, the trend was similar to savings because that is how investments flow. It cannot be that you will have high saving with low investment phase. That was not happening. The trend was similar to savings. The reasons were different. All right. So you write the first one in that. Low investment phase, 50 to 67. Again, the time period will be same. 1950 to 1967. Low investment phase, 1950 to 1967. No, this is trend of investment. We are again beginning the trend. एक बात और मैं आपको बताना भूल गया, वो क्लियर कर देता हूं. ये जो 1, 2 and 3 हैं, पहले 3 एलिमेंट्स जो थे इन्वेंट्री से पहले, बिजनेस फिक्स्ड इन्वेस्टमेंट, रेजिडेंशियल कंस्ट्रक्शन इन्वेस्टमेंट, पब्लिक इन्वेस्टमेंट, they are sometimes also called gross fixed capital formation. All right? If you see the term gross fixed capital formation, if you see the term gross fixed capital formation, then simply think gross fixed capital formation, then simply think we are talking about business fixed investment plus residential construction investment plus public investment. Business fixed investment plus residential construction investment plus public investment. All right, that is what you should think as. And then of course this plus change in stock is gross capital formation. जब आप इसमें change in stock add कर देते हैं तो उसे कहा जाता है that you have total capital formation or your gross capital formation. I can believe you are okay on this. Okay, now let's do the trend. आप कुछ बातें लिख लीजिए यहाँ. You write investment in 1951, investment in 1951 was approximately 7% and increased to 10% by 1955 and finally reached 16% of GDP, finally reached 16% of GDP in 1967. Increase in investment was mainly due to high public sector investment growth, full stop. At the time of independence, %80 of total investment in India, at the time of independence, 80% of total investment in India was by private sector, because remember Britishers were running a system with a lot of private sector dominance. So 80% of investment in India in 1951 was private sector. It was not public sector, right? But by 1967, more than 60% of total investment was by public sector. Full stop. Apart from public investment, high growth was also recorded in business fixed investment, because development of infrastructure development of infrastructure resulted in large growth of profit opportunities. All right. Then again you write 1968-69 to 1979, 10 years. 1968-69, the second phase then, 1968-69 to 1979, this is growth in investment phase. Growth in investment phase. This was the phase when investment started growing faster in India. So growth in investment phase. Again, if you can match 68-69 to 75-76 and 75-76 to 79-80, savings were also rising. So with the rise in savings, investments were also picking up. So growth in investment phase, you write in that, by the end of this time period, investment had become more than 21% of GDP. This was due to first, again I'm giving you the reasons, increased expenditure on infrastructure by the government, increased expenditure on infrastructure by the government. I was telling you a little while back that 70s was the time when we were focusing a lot on infrastructure building, long-term preparations. So this was one factor which was happening, especially infrastructure on ports and infrastructure in roads. We were focusing a lot on that. All right, I thought you were saying something to me. All right, let's see this. You write to increase in spread of banking and financial enterprises, increase in spread of banking and financial enterprises resulted in quicker and cheaper loan facility, cheaper loan means lesser interest rate, loan facility for business development in rural areas. I can believe you understand. Again, business development in rural areas means again investments becoming higher in rural areas. So for business development in rural areas. Another point you write, the spread of agricultural revolutions resulted in increasing investment in agriculture like storehouses, cattle sheds, animal husbandry infrastructure, and agricultural equipments like tractors, agricultural equipments like tractors, animal husbandry infrastructure, and agricultural equipments like tractors. So these became the factors why investment started picking up between 68-69 to 78-79. So 70s was a decade with high inflation investment. Again, 79-80 to 85 presented stagnation. 1979-80 to 1985 was period of stagnation. 1979-80 to 1985 was the period of stagnation. Now, what was that stagnation? Again, the same thing. We had excess capacity, and the demand was not as much as what that capacity that we had created. Also, savings rate had started coming down. So the financing of investment was becoming more and more difficult. You write one line in that. At the end of this phase, investment remained at the end of this phase, investment remained at 21.7%, at 21.7%, which was almost similar, to level of investment in the beginning of the phase. The reasons were now I'll explain the reasons to you one by one. There are the three reasons mainly. You write one, slowdown and recession of late 1970s impacted sentiments of investors, and led to less investment growth, in the economy. So, that became one big factor, that the slowdown of 1970s had made a negative sentiment among investors that the country is going down. We will not revive. The demand was pending, all right, and demand had not picked up in the later half of 70s. So many investors were not willing to invest. They were not creating new capacity. They were not willing to set up more equipments. Also, the restrictive policies were already playing their role. We had MRTP, or we would have FERA. So the investors were already in a problem, and then there was hardly any demand observed, and then the growth was negative. They said, okay, let's not invest for some time. All right. Second was a related thing to first. You write it and I will explain it to you. You write two, firms had developed excess capacity due to which there was no incentive to invest unless the capacity was completely used. No incentive to invest unless the capacity was fully used. Understand this point. What was happening in 1970s? The government was incentivizing the firms to expand one way or the other. Infrastructure was being built, loans were given by public sector units. So some firms got incentivized. 70s की बात कर रहा हूँ, 80s की नहीं. Early 70s especially, they felt that okay, the economy will do well in future because the government is investing more today. Let's also build up capacity so that when economy does well, we are able to sell more. But what happened was, on the opposite, after 1975, the economy got more disturbed. There was an emergency followed by a temporary government and then the recession of 79-80. So whatever capacity they had created, even that was not getting used. You see, that gets connected to the first point. So now the capacity is not being used. Obviously, as a firm, I am feeling, unless you don't give me more to sell, why should I expand my capacity? That incentive they started having in 80s. यहाँ एक concept clear कर रहा हूँ. जब डिमांड बढ़ता है, क्योंकि आपके मन में आ सकता है कि सर अभी तो आपने कहा कंज्यूमरिज्म बढ़ गया, सरकार के खर्चे बढ़ गए, तो फर्म को डिमांड तो मिल ही रहा था, तो क्यों उन्होंने इन्वेस्टमेंट नहीं बढ़ाया? This can come to your mind that a little while back you were saying consumerism has increased and expenditures had increased. So why firms were not creating capacity? Because you don't observe the rising demand immediately. You understand that? You see that happening, and only when you are convinced it is permanent, it is going to happen, will you change and do it. Understand it like that. All right, you don't otherwise see the rising demand. All right, you see it over 3, 4, 5 years. Again, when you see it rising, you will change your position and you will start investing more. But until you are not convinced and unless you have not seen it properly, you won't be investing no matter how much somebody incentivizes you. So I can give you a cheaper loan and I can give you investment subsidy, but you will still be wary. आप फिर भी थोड़ा सोच समझ के खर्च करोगे, invest करोगे, अगर आपको डर है कि future में demand pickup नहीं करेगा. All right, so that became a challenge again on investment. Then you write the next point. The sixth five-year plan saw government's focus shifting from high investments towards other expenditures like poverty alleviation, and that resulted in reducing growth rate of investment. Okay, I'll tell you what one implies here. Priority of government had changed. 70s, the priority was infrastructure development, focus on public sector enterprise, capacity creation. But by 80s, we were focusing on poverty alleviation programs. We were focusing on government public administration growth and so on, which meant that we were investing less on government's part. So सरकार के investments कम होने लगे. That again further reduced investment capacity in the system. All right. So these were the reasons why investment remained relatively low between 1979. By low, I don't mean low. I mean didn't increase. It remained where it was between 79, 80, and 85. I will again repeat: investment and consumption follow each other in tandem, and if the economy is growing, then maybe both can rise. But 70s were a drastically bad decade for India. So people were the inertia or the hysteresis effect of 70s continues. Hysteresis effect होता है जब कुछ भी बहुत अच्छा या कुछ भी बहुत बुरा आपके इकोनॉमी में हो और उसका असर बहुत दिनों तक फील किया जाता रहे. It comes from the word hysteria. If something very good or something very bad happens in the economy and then the effect is felt for a long period of time, that's hysteresis effect. So the hysteresis effect of 70s continued in 80s, especially early 80s, when people were still worried. Now, it's a political factor, but I hope you would understand that late 70s and early 80s were politically very volatile in India with respect to even peace. Punjab started burning, that was the time period. Tamil Nadu had disturbance, that was the time period. Jammu and Kashmir started having certain troubles, not entirely, I mean the major trouble happened in 86, 87 onwards, but basic troubles in 80s. So there were disturbances all across. And then stability went missing because business looks at all of that. So business wants all of these to be there so that it can plan to invest more. But if these things are missing, and you see that overall structure is not improving, then investments slow down even further. Also remember, internationally many changes were happening. Eastern Europe was completely changing its disposition. So there was communist rule ending in many countries of Eastern Europe, Soviet Union becoming weaker, so they were in less position to help us. All these were also factors which were making us adjust. इन फैक्टर्स की वजह से हमें एडजस्ट करना पड़ रहा था कि भाई अब नए तरीके से सोचना पड़ेगा कि इन्वेस्टमेंट कैसे बढ़ाएं. Then came the next phase, 1985-86 to 1992-93, which was again the period of revival of investment and again high growth rate. All right. Why did I? High saving phase as in? You mean the explanation part? Okay, I didn't realize. I can explain it to you. Let me finish this and I'll go back to it. Thank you for letting me know. I didn't realize. So I was just reminded that phase 3 explanation part I didn't do with you in high savings phase. I will be going back to it as I finish the investment discussion. It won't take us more than 5 minutes because the points are easy to understand. I will be going into that. All right. Then 85-86 to 92-93, 85-86 to 92-93, this was again said to be revival and high investment. Revival and high investment. In this case, this is also called the high growth phase and so on. So by the time we end this phase, 1992-93, 23.7% investment, which is almost 24%, was already observed. By the time we were ending this phase, 23.7% investment. मैं जानबूझ के 92-93 ले रहा हूँ क्योंकि 91-92 एक normal year नहीं था. It was a crisis year. So if I take 91-92 data, it will not show the correct picture. I hope everybody is clear on that. In case it comes to your mind that why do you take 92-93? Because 91-92 was not a normal year. In fact, if you ask me, even 92-93 was not a very normal year for investment because people were still having the hangover of the crisis of 91-92. But still, to some extent, investment had revived. And as I told you, by 94-95, our investments were already going above 25%. All right, but we'll stick to 92-93, and it was 23.7% investment that we reached here, and now investments were growing relatively faster in India. What were the reasons for this happening? You write a line in this, you write, investment had reached 26% of GDP, investment had reached 26% of GDP in 1990-91, but due to economic crisis of 91-92, due to economic crisis of 91-92, it declined and again revived and again revived to reach approximately 24%, approximately 24% in 1992-93. The growth of investment during this period was due to and you write A, very high printing of money by central bank, very high printing of money by central bank allowed public investments, allowed public investments to be increased significantly. B, or second part, growth in demand, growth in demand between growth in demand between 1980 to 85 incentivized expenditure on investment by private sector. Third, there was development of consumer durable industries, consumer durable industries. Another name for them is white goods industry. White goods, all right, television, refrigerator, these are white goods, washing machine, ये बढ़ने लगे थे. So consumer durable industries in 1980s led to higher investment. All right, you put a note below that and write, however, the increase in investment was accompanied by large current account deficit, I'm sure you would recall current account deficit would be above 4% by 1990-91. So large current account deficit, comma, high fiscal deficit, and absence of quality investment focusing on technological upgradation, Therefore, in spite of high investment phase, Therefore, in spite of high investment phase, India still recorded, in spite of high investment phase, India still recorded crowding out and economic crisis of 1991. All right, I just wanted you to know, have an overview that we were fiscally indisciplined, we were externally indisciplined, and the quality of investment was not good. So again, on paper we looked strong. I kept telling you that in discussion on 80s, but in practice we were not that strong. And sometimes that becomes a very dicey situation. All right, so that was the challenge we had during this investment growth phase. Yes, yes. You know what was happening? Government was trying to invest without leaving their vested interests. Then how do you get the result? If I want to help you but I want my profit first, then how will the result happen? You understand that? When I had joined Next IAS, I had said this to someone, among the faculty members only, that the best way to do this business, our business, is not to do business. If we don't do business with you and rather treat you as our own children, then even business will flourish. When we start doing business with you and start believing, okay, what do you give me in return? What is the per hour cost of my classroom? Or what is the percentage value that I will get from Next IAS from this classroom? And if that decides my dedication towards teaching you, then definitely I'm a sure shot failure when it comes to being a teacher. And if I'm not a good teacher, I will not be even doing good business in the field of teaching. So first I have to be a good teacher to teach well. Similarly, if the government starts thinking, how do I control but liberalize? How do you do that? That's an oxymoron. You can't control and liberalize. So it was about, okay, I will set up a Maruti Suzuki, but Maruti will give contract to all those people who are loyal to my party. I will set up a Hero Honda, but I will set up the plants in Manesar, etc., where the government is mine and where I have a control over the resources. So I am liberalizing, but I am liberalizing with a personal agenda, and that doesn't give me growth. You understand that? It's only when you liberalize with a long-term thing and a broader agenda that, look, my country is in trouble. That's the liberalization we did in India post-91. That we are in trouble. We got to do right policies so that we can make sure we pay back IMF and we can get out of the rut we have put ourselves in. Now there is no vested interest in your mind, even though even then vested interests come in, but at least you are not on the agenda. Like you are not supporting the vested interests. That was a big difference between 80s growth and 90s growth. You can't have a liberalized economy in a government-controlled atmosphere. Then you will definitely meet a roadblock. So that was the challenge actually of 80s. So they were trying to, because they knew there is a problem and it has to be resolved, but somewhere the conviction was missing, and more importantly, ability to leave was missing. You understand? मैं control छोड़ दूं, मेरे हाथ से ये बात निकल जाए, आज तक missing है 80s को छोड़ो. आज भी सरकार किस चक्कर में लगे रहते हैं? I call it again controlling by stealth. Sting of the scorpion, रघुराम राजन बोलते थे इसको. कि हर कानून में बनाऊंगा लिबरलाइज वाला और एंड में एक लाइन लगा दूंगा जिससे लिबरलाइजेशन की ऐसी की तैसी हो जाए. I'll give you an example. So there was a suggestion given to the government. Since I said this stronger words in the last line, there was a suggestion given to the government that all money that you collect through disinvestment should be going to the National Investment Infrastructure Fund, so that the money cannot be misused and the money cannot be used for populist activities. This was said in 2015. The government, the suggestion was coming since long, but 2015 the government said we accept it. What rule do they frame? They say all money that will be collected by disinvestment will go to National Investment Fund, and then they add the sting of the scorpion as decided by the finance minister. Now, where is the discretion going? It remains the same. The finance minister will decide. यही तो खत्म करने की बात थी. That finance minister should have no say in it. So we liberalized ostensibly, but we didn't. Look at what the economic survey writes this year. Hilarious. They say that government has strategically disinvested 10 companies in India. Correct. They are not factually incorrect. But how strategically disinvested मतलब सरकार ने अपने majority share किसी और को बेच दिए. That's a strategic disinvestment. That I have sold as a government my majority stake to somebody else. What do they do in that majority stake sale? So out of these 10 companies, 8 companies are where government has sold its majority stake to another government company. So Karthik calling Karthik. You don't have any impact of that. सिर्फ 2 कंपनीज प्राइवेटाइज हुई, एयर इंडिया एंड नीलांचल इस्पात, पिछले 9 सालों में. और मुझे बड़ा आश्चर्य लगता है, जो मोदी जी को सपोर्ट करते हैं वो भी बोलते हैं ये सरकार ने बदल दिया मामला, प्राइवेटाइजेशन की सरकार है, ये तो न्यू लिबरल इकोनॉमी लाएंगे. जो अपोज करते हैं वो भी कहते हैं सब बेच रहे हैं, देश बेच रहे हैं. कोई रुक के सोच ही नहीं रहा बेचा क्या भाई पिछले 9 साल में. ये तो समझ ले पहले that what has been sold in the last 9 years, and then we get an answer that finally 2 companies have been privatized in the last 9 years, Air India and Neelachal Ispat, and that also last year. So for the first 7.5 years, we practically privatized the thing, but imagine the level of noise in India. Understand that. तो हम लोग थोड़े insanity पे border करते हैं कभी कभी. मैं अपना एक टेलीग्राम ग्रुप मेरा है, आप में से कुछ लोग जानते होंगे, उस पर मैं इंसैनिटी की बात कर रहा हूं यहां. उस पर मैंने 15 अगस्त के दिन लिख दिया हैप्पी इंडिपेंडेंस डे एंड मे लॉर्ड विष्णु हेल्प ऑल ऑफ अस. कोई कितने इंसेन हो सकते हैं, किसी एक ने उसको भी डिसलाइक किया हुआ है. You know, I started laughing when I saw that. I said, maybe the hatred is getting the better of this person, or I don't know. That I'm telling you Happy Independence Day, and you are disliking it, and you still remain on the channel. The irrationality is that. I mean, if I dislike something or dislike someone, I would rather keep away from it. Why let my negativity grow? You know, we are all humans, so we have our liking and disliking. अब मान लीजिए मुझे किसी चीज से disliking है, तो मैं या किसी person से भी है, मैं उनकी बात वैसे to be on a personal note मुझे किसी person से disliking नहीं हुई आज तक. कुछ गड़बड़ है मेरे DNA में मुझे लगता है, you know, but मुझे किसी person से disliking नहीं होती कभी. कुछ things से है जरूर, कुछ activities से है. मैं जनरली कोशिश करता हूँ उनकी चर्चा से या उनकी बातचीत से दूर रहूं, क्योंकि वो मेरी नेगेटिविटी निकालते हैं. You know, that is my point. पर आप सोचिए हम ऐसे लोग बन गए हैं जो वहां फॉलो करने को तैयार हैं जहां मैं ट्रोल करने बैठा हूं. कितनी बेरोजगारी है. I mean, how unemployed a troll can be. I have never imagined that. कि कोई और कुछ कर रहा है, मैं उसके पीछे पड़ा हुआ हूं, तुमने ये क्यों लिखा, तुम क्यों देखे क्यों रहे हो, भाड़ में जाए वो. यही इंडिया ऑफ 80s भी बन गया था. समझाने इसलिए ये बातें आपको कह रहा था. उस वक्त बस सोशल मीडिया नहीं था, तो वॉल्यूम ऑफ नॉइज वाज नॉट हर्ड एज मच. बट इंडिया ऑफ 80s was something similar to what we have become today, that people would try finding a fault in everything that we would try doing, and so on and so forth. But anyways, so that is an answer, just trying to answer your question, that why even though government tried improving, where were we going wrong, or what was the mistake happening? And again, I'll repeat, we were going majorly wrong in our attitude towards development. Yes. Private sector now. In fact, by 1992-93, private sector was contributing almost 60% to total investment. No, there were several. In fact, they were investing in outdated technology, not realizing that new technologies are coming in. There was no major investment in research and development projects. They were also not investing in improving their capacity. Sometimes the investment was just to kind of show to the government to get license and permits that they are doing better. जैसे सरकार ने बोला अगर आप यहाँ खर्चा करेंगे तो आपको हम ज्यादा पैसा देंगे, तो दिखा देते थे कि हमने यहाँ खर्चा कर दिया. Well, that also, these were challenging parts of 80s investment of India. No, huge. Government's wasteful expenditure was not on investment, but on consumer goods, like say poverty alleviation. public administration improvement. So they were spending, but they were not doing quality expenditure. All right, that was the problem. Now see, this is an idea of how savings and investment operated. If you come back to your notes, the printed ones again, I will quickly finish one explanation with you. If you could come to page 13 again, page 13, 1975-76 to 79-80. 1975-76 to 79-80. If you see there, the first 2-3 points I hope you understand. Increase in agriculture and allied activities income led to high savings. Regional rural banks were set up. That led to high savings. Government savings increased. If you recall, yesterday I was telling you that in some of the years government was having fiscal surplus rather than deficit. In fact, 75-76 was one such year when we had a fiscal surplus rather than deficit. Of course, that fiscal surplus was backed by a lot of money printing. तो हम बोरो नहीं करते थे, मनी प्रिंट करके काम चला लेते थे और हम कमाल की हरकतें करते थे. We would print money and now the price will go up as you print money. So what we did was we will have administered price mechanism so that the prices don't go up, and now the private sector will retaliate in its own manner. So now you are not letting them increase the price, but they know very well that people have money and they know very well that demand is there for my commodity. So what they would do is, in white market they would show less production, they would shift the commodity to black market and charge high price in the black market, make more profit. On paper everything fine, in practice shambles. And we all acted as if nothing is happening. You know, ये acting का capacity भी हम में tremendous है कि हम एक्ट कर लेते हैं कि कुछ नहीं हो रहा, मामला ठीक है, कागज पे लिखा है ना, बस हो गया, चुप रहो. यू नो, रियलिटी में क्या हो रहा है मतलब नहीं. तो ये हमारी इकोनॉमी बन गई थी 70s और 80s में. दैट यू नो रॉन्ग थिंग्स वुड हैपन इन प्रैक्टिस, बट देन ऑन पेपर एवरीथिंग लुक्ड फाइन एंड पीपल थॉट एवरीथिंग इज फाइन. So that again was a challenge that we were having in those days, that you know black marketing etc. became pretty high. In fact हम मुफ्त में बहुत चीजें दे रहे थे जो हम देते ही नहीं थे. जैसे मुफ्त की बिजली. अब गांव में 15, 17, 18, 20 घंटे 22 घंटे बिजली नहीं होती थी, पर हम कहते थे किसान भाइयों को मुफ्त का बिजली देंगे. You know, I might have told you this earlier. If I am repeating, I am sorry. But you know, as a student, I was doing my masters. I had gone for a research to Madhya Pradesh, and there were children who were swinging on electric wire. और मैं रिसर्च असिस्टेंट था, रिसर्चर नहीं था. जॉन ड्रीज सर थे, वो रिसर्च कर रहे थे, वो हेड कर रहे थे टीम को. मैं उनके अंदर असिस्टेंट था. सर वाज काइंड इनफ टू कीप मी एज हिज असिस्टेंट. वी वर 3-4 assistants of his. I had applied through Delhi School of Economics. He had entertained my application, and you know, the sir was interviewing the sarpanch, and matter of factly we saw the children swinging. So one of us told the sarpanch was a young fellow, 30-32. So we told the sarpanch that please look into this. If by chance electricity comes, these people will die. With all confidence he said, ऐसे कैसे आ जाएगा, मैं भी इसी पे खेल के बड़ा हुआ हूँ. So this was the confidence that, you know, I have grown up playing on this, swinging on this. How come you will have electricity? So, you know, he was confident that for 20 years, if electricity has not come, it will not come. Let the children swing on the wire. This was where we were before the Electricity Amendment Act of 2003. It was only the Central Electricity Amendment Act of 2003 that Vajpayee government had brought in India, which has changed the structure of electrification in India. So what your generation sees today is very different from what my generation used to see. 12 hours of power cut in urban areas would be very common. It was not such a strange thing to have a 12-hour power cut, even in a place like Delhi. So, you know, many of your parents would tell you the stories that we would sleep on the roof and you know, we would pick up our bed and throughout the night, no power was a normal thing. Normal thing. Villages not having power was normal thing. जैसे गांव गए हैं तो कहाँ से बिजली मिलेगी? गांव में तो बिजली नहीं होगी. और लोग भी यूज्ड टू थे कि गांव में थोड़ी बिजली होती है. और मैं 90s की बात कर रहा हूँ, जब मैं कॉलेज वगैरह में था. मैं मानता हूँ वो उस समय की बात है जब हड़प्पा के लोग घूमते थे आसपास, you know. लेकिन इंपॉर्टेंट है ये समझना that you know India was not that good even till late mid 90s infrastructure wise. Not having a road was very normal. That road won't reach your village. I mean, I still remember as kids when we would, मैं बता ही चुका हूँ कि जब मैं छोटा था तो हड़प्पा का ज़माना था. लेकिन but as kids when we would go to our village, my village is 260 kilometers from Patna in Bihar, you know. When we would go to our village, once we landed in Patna, after that it would be a 12 hours bus ride. to our village overnight. 7-8 बजे शाम को बस चलती थी, सुबह 7-8 बजे पहुंचाती थी आप, और 260 किलोमीटर के लिए आपकी पीठ 1-2 दिन अकड़ी रहेगी और बात वहीं खत्म नहीं होती थी। फिर आप अपने टाउन में उतरते थे, वहां से आप एक रिक्शा लेंगे या कोई गाड़ी लेंगे, गाड़ी मतलब वो मशीन वाली नहीं, बैलगाड़ी काइंड ऑफ, और फिर अपने गांव जाएंगे। सो अनदर 10 kilometers इनसाइड, व्हिच मेंट अनदर 3.5 hours, 4 hours. And honestly speaking, me and my brother, I remember very well, we would not even go to our village through rickshaw and all. We would get down and rather walk. My mother, poor lady, in those days, the village पर्सन, तो उनको वो बहू है गांव के, तो उनको तो नीचे उतर के चलना अलाउड नहीं है, तो उनको पकड़ के बिठा देते थे रिक्शे में या बैलगाड़ी में अपना बैठे हुए। बहुत बहुत अगर अमीरी आ गई तो ट्रैक्टर आ जाता था आपके लिए। उस ट्रैक्टर में बैठने की आपकी हिम्मत नहीं होती थी क्योंकि रोड खराब था, वो ट्रेलर इतना इतना जंप मारेगा, तो आप डर के मारे नहीं बैठते थे। So this is something that we have seen as India till as late as just 20-25 years ago, when we were in college or passing out college, etc., or even after I came back from my PhD. Now these are changes we see happening in the last 20 years. Road development, electrification. Like today it takes me 4.5 hours complete through a stopwatch to reach the door of my village house from Patna. कि मैं अगर सुबह 8 बजे की फ्लाइट पकड़ता हूँ, 9 बजे पटना में लैंड करता हूँ, 9:30-10 बजे तक वहां से गाड़ी लेकर अगर मैं गांव गया, 2:30 बजे दिन का खाना गांव में खा रहा हूँ अपने में। ये आज की सड़क है भारत की, कि मैं पहुंच गए अपने गांव, कोई दिक्कत नहीं, बिजली है गांव में। तो ये तो देखा ही नहीं हम लोग। तो ये हमारा देश हुआ करता था। ये आपको इसलिए बता रहा हूं दैट अनलेस यू डोंट गेट बेसिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, अनलेस यू डोंट गिव पीपल बेसिक एमिनिटीज, हाउ डू यू एक्सपेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट्स टू ग्रो इन योर कंट्री? Investments will always follow amenities. Investments cannot precede amenities. I won't come and set up a factory in your place unless you don't give me the basic amenities to stay in that place. So that was the challenge. इसलिए मैं आपको वो story सुना रहा था कि गांव कैसे थे हमारे. Just needed you to know that. Okay, anyways, the next one was the high saving phase was also due to large, this is a point that will need explanation. All of you listen to me carefully. Phase 3, the fourth point. The high saving phase was also due to large food procurement and distribution by the government, which put more disposable income with common people. See, we started food for work program in India from 1975-76. We also started food distribution in India from 77-78. So what now started happening was people got food from the government at a cheaper rate, which meant that the money they had to spend on food could now be saved. You understand that? That the money that had to be spent on food could now be saved. That is the rise in disposable income. That income which is left for expenditure for other purposes. So the money that I had now in my hand was more, my food etc. needs were met, and that increased my savings rate. Do I believe I reach you on that? Okay. In the same thing, if you could move to page number 15, please. Page number 15. This is analysis of saving and investment impact on economic growth. That is what I have given you there. My age is 47.5. I'll be 48 by January. आपके एक मित्र पूछ रहे हैं आपकी उम्र क्या है? All right. Yes, business fixed investment is investment in capital goods. Venkatesh, you are right. Yes, correct. All investments are expenditure, but all expenditures are not investment because consumption and government expenditure can also be expenditure. Crowding out effect, Samiksha, you can see from yesterday's class. If you could just see, you will get crowding out effect there. All right. Jhunjhunu is in bad state. I agree with you, Pooja. Jhunjhunu is a district in Rajasthan, and that is in bad state, no doubt. All right. एक बात और पूछे आपके दोस्त कि 60 से 80 के बीच में ग्रोथ नहीं हुआ था तो इंडस्ट्री में एक्सेस कैपेसिटी कहाँ कैसे आई? आप मिस कर गए शायद मुझे सुनते हुए. 1960 to 80 industrial growth was not happening much, but infrastructure development work had started in 70s. Government was pushing the companies to invest more, create more capacity, and companies had experienced the high or relatively higher demand phase of 60s and early 70s. And that was pushing them to create capacity, expecting that by mid 70s, more demand will be there. But unfortunately, mid 70s and late 70s, demand collapsed. We had recession. But by then, the companies had made their capacity, so they were not investing. मैं आपको एक analogy देता हूँ, समझिएगा. 2003 to 2008, I'm sure many of you would even be able to recognize. 2003 to 2008, 10 in fact, India had good growth story. Now many people created investment capacity due to that, expecting more growth in future. But 2010 to 2015-16, the growth story took a bad turn. We didn't grow as much. But by then the capacity had been created. From 2015, government brought many reforms, like say a Real Estate Regulation Act, and so on. But still, investment did not pick up because the firms had already invested, and the firms had borrowed a lot for that investment, so they were over-leveraged. So they didn't want to invest more in the country now, knowing that, okay, let us meet this expenditure, then we do it. Then government, in spite of bringing all structural reforms, did some self-goals, like demonetization. So if you demonetize, you again make sectors go down, and again consumption takes a beating. We had two bad droughts in 2015 and 16 in India. So all this meant that firms were not getting enough demand. But demonetization was a big culprit when it comes to why Indian demand fell, and India faced a very low growth of 3.9% in 2019-20. It was combined with many other things. GST was introduced. Now, GST is not a bad law, but whenever you change the rule, initial couple of years will be lost in adjusting to the changed rule. That became a factor why, again, GDP growth also took a beating, demand took a beating. Demonetization, I have already told you. Then imagine programs like Real Estate Regulation Act. Again, a great idea. It's a good idea to have a Real Estate Regulation Act. But these are structural reforms. Now, many people who were used to the earlier system, इसकी टोपी उसके सर का सिस्टम था कि एक प्रोजेक्ट के लिए पैसा लो, दूसरे प्रोजेक्ट में लगा दो. तो हाउसिंग सिस्टम हमारा ऐसे चलता था. अब रियल एस्टेट रेगुलेशन एक्ट meant you can't take money for one project and put it in another. That meant suddenly new project announcements came to a halt. You understand that? So if you see, if you do structural reforms and if people have already created capacity, unless people don't see new demand coming in, people don't invest so easily in the economy. If you see the last 3 years, unfortunately newspapers don't report it for unknown reasons. Like the reasons are known, but I won't go into that. But if you see the last 2-3 years, investment has again shown a pickup. 30% of GDP was the investment level in 2021-22, and 34% of GDP is the investment level in 2023-24, projected in the first quarter estimate. Now that means investment has again picked up by around 10 to 15% in the last 3-4 years, because again the demand, fresh demand, has started picking up in India. So all these things play their role. मैंने आपको अभी का एनालॉजी इसलिए दिया इस पिछले 15-16 साल का कि आप समझ सकें कि कैसे कुछ समय आता है जब लोग ज़्यादा इन्वेस्ट करते हैं ये सोचकर कि फ्यूचर में डिमांड बढ़ेगा. अगर नहीं बढ़ता डिमांड फ्यूचर में तो वो आगे इन्वेस्ट नहीं करते कुछ दिनों तक डिमांड बढ़ने के बाद भी, क्योंकि उनको डर है कि आगे बढ़ेगा या नहीं देख लें. दूसरा, उनको ऑलरेडी कैपेसिटी है तो नए इन्वेस्टमेंट की ज़रूरत नहीं रहती. All right, so that was the reason that initially 60 to 80 different phases came in. In some phases people spent more, expecting demand to rise. That was 1969, 70, 71, 72. You can imagine the euphoria of 71, 72. Green revolution was spreading. We did not need food imports. We had beaten Pakistan in a war. You understand that? So everybody was thinking, oh, now the growth is obvious. Who can stop us from growing? And then came the drastic change from 75 onwards. JP movement, emergency, a temporary government and Janata Party, demand going down, oil shocks of 72, 73 and 79, 80. I hope you would have heard of the oil shocks. Oil prices suddenly rising in 1972, 73, then 79, 80, which meant demand suddenly came down from what was projected. And that meant that firms who had invested did not know now what to do with the capacity. So even when demand started picking up in 1980s, the early 80s, the firms waited. They said, okay, let's utilize the capacity. Let us see if we have made good, and then maybe we can invest more. So this is how circularly it moves. I hope you understand the idea between consumption investment relation and all. Okay, now see, on this part, page number 15, you would see First point is growth of investment and output was mainly enabled by domestic savings. But understand this, अगर आप savings investment के trend को देखेंगे, savings have always been 2% lesser than investment. You see that 2 to 3% lesser. There's a gap between savings and investment. Who was funding the rest 2-3% of GDP? Aid and loan, which was not healthy. All right, हाँ समझ रहा हूँ मैं. So aid and loan, which was not healthy. All right, understand that initially saving investment was growing, but saving were 2 to 3% lesser than investment. And this this gap between saving and investment was funded by aid and by loan. It was not funded by FDI or FII because we didn't permit that. You understand that? That's our first point, that the growth was not that permanent because we were dependent on aid and loans. The next one, there was low incremental capital output ratio over the entire period. Incremental capital output ratio is the extra capital you need to produce your extra unit of output. That is called incremental capital output ratio. You know, this is extra units of capital needed to produce extra units of output. And India's incremental capital output ratio more or less remained around 4. All right, that we, for every 4 extra unit of capital, we could produce 1 extra unit of output. But the problem was, in this case, that this low incremental capital output ratio was not because of efficiency of capital, it was because of less use of capital. I can believe you recall law of diminishing marginal returns. All right, so what happens there? When you use less amount of an input, the productivity of the input remains high. And as you go on increasing your input use, the productivity goes on becoming lesser. All right, this kind of a graph, if you recall, if I take, say, capital here, and if I take output, it goes something like this. That output increases at a decreasing rate. So that means that as I go on using more capital, my productivity goes on becoming lesser. Now in India's case, the incremental capital output ratio was low, not because we were efficient, but because we were using less capital. And that was again a challenge, that we were not yet modernizing. We were not using good amount of capital. All right. So since we were using lesser capital, the capital output ratio remained low, which was again not a healthy phase to be in. Another point I have given you, that mixed economy resulted with private sector enterprises helping, which was again a decent idea because now the entire onus of development was not only on public sector. I will discuss with you separately the role of public sector and the role of private sector in India between 47 to 91. UPSC has asked us question on this, तो वो मैं अलग से आपसे चर्चा करूंगा कि role of public sector क्या था, role of private sector क्या था. दोनों बातें UPSC पूछ चुके हैं, that what was the role of public sector between 47 and 91 and what was the role of private sector between 47 and 91. But private sector was supporting public sector in investment, which led to more resource generation. All right, that was another feature of saving investment-led growth of India of this time period. Another point that I have given you was inflation was low throughout the time period except mid-70s. But remember, as I told you, inflation was low because of administered price mechanism. For honest firms, it took away the incentive to innovate and develop because low inflation means low nominal returns. Low nominal returns sometimes take away your incentive to produce. And for corrupt firms, it meant development of a black market. You understand that? So overall, the production capacity did not rise in spite of low inflation. Then, another point I have given you was credit to GDP ratio remained low in spite of bank nationalization. That was again a challenge, that loans taken as a ratio of GDP were low, which showed less entrepreneurial growth. What is a credit to GDP ratio? Credit means loans taken. So how much loan are you taking as a ratio of your GDP? This loan taken as a ratio of GDP remained relatively low, again during this time period, which showed that entrepreneurship was not growing as much, or even consumption expenditure was not growing as much. In fact, till 1991, India did not have a culture of purchasing things on EMI because we did not have a liberalized financial structure. ये जो हम आज कर जाते हैं ना, गाड़ी खरीद लिए लोन पर, घर खरीद लिए लोन पर, ये नहीं होता था. The best we had was a hire purchase, that you hire the product and then gradually keep paying the installment, and after the entire installment is paid, then you will get the rights on the product. So we had an outdated system again, which meant credit flow was weak. All right. And then I've given you that fiscal deficit was in control in most of the year, but deteriorated in 80s. If you again recall, I told you that fiscal deficit in 70s was in control, with a lot of money printing also playing its role. All right, keep that in mind. Till 60s we were disciplined, but 70s onwards the manipulations began. All right, so that should be kept in mind. जो मैं साथ साथ बोलता जाऊं उसे जरूर दिमाग में रख लोगे अपने. And then both current and capital account of BOP were in deficit because a lot of borrowing was happening during 80s. Current account of BOP in deficit means my export lesser than import majorly. Capital account of BOP in deficit, in a sense, that, like deficit of course here doesn't mean mathematical deficit. Deficit here means a lot of borrowings on capital account. We did not allow investments to come in, so we had a lot of borrowings on capital account of BOP. All right. For those of you who don't know BOP, you wait. I will be explaining it to you. You will get the current account, capital account part better. But the idea is, on current account, imports were much high. On capital account, borrowings were very high. And that meant that we had a lot of outflow pressure on currency, which again created issues for India. More or less, even though saving and investment showed growth during these 40 years, yet they did not give India the actual capacity to develop faster. All right, that is the basic conclusion of it. Now don't worry, I will be making you write one paragraph tomorrow on how you will conclude the answer if they ask you on savings and investment. I'm giving you a question, you think over it, and we will be discussing it again. A question, you write, critically analyze the policy of command and control in pre-liberalization India, with respect to its impact on industrial development in India. Okay, just keep one thing in mind when you are thinking an answer for this. Don't only think about the negatives of industrial development. It's a critical analysis. So industrial diversification, mobilization of savings, making India self-sufficient, all those factors also come into picture. So it will be a mix. I'll teach you again, I'll make you write the answer, but we'll go into that. I will also make you write the answer tomorrow of the second question I had given you last week. I'll make you write the answer to that. And I'll give you one more question tomorrow, and both those answers I will give you next week. All right? Thank you. Have a great time then. Yes, yes. हाँ, मैं बस ये solve कर दूँ, 2 मिनट लगेंगे मुझे. You will get the PDF in the PDF section of your app, Shahina. Just check the PDF section of your app, and you will get that. Ankita, you can get it collected from Next IAS. Expenditures can include consumption and government expenditure also, Shaista. So they will not be investment, no? Perfect, Ankit. I will make you write the answer to the first question also, Divyanshi. I never prepared for UPSC Yashasvi, unfortunately. Yes, yes, you can always join it, Sukanya. Hard copy you can collect from the center, Ankit. Thank you, everyone. Chanchal, Geeta. Yes, sure, Divyanshi. Tonight around 9:30. Inventory is same as change in stock, Jasleen. Bye-bye, Anvesha. Yes, yes. हाँ ठीक है ठीक है हाँ ठीक है मैं वो केन्स का मॉडल है क्लासिकल का मॉडल है ठीक है नहीं चिंता मत करो तुम इंटरेस्टेड वाले रिलेशन को याद रखो ऑलराइट हाँ डाल देता है ठीक है नहीं नहीं मैं तुम्हें अभी बता देता हूँ मैं तुम्हें अभी बता देता हूँ If income rises, then C plus I both can rise. महेंद्र एक बार रिवाइज कर लेना मैंने एक्सप्लेन किया पॉइंट 4 को एक बार फिर चेक कर लेना तुम्हें मिल जाएगा It was due to less use of capital, Harshit. Just that. Dual gap can be both positive and negative. Thank you, Parmeet. You don't need any book, Ritu, at the moment. Around 250 words, Ritik. Thank you, everyone, then. People online, I'll see you tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Thank you and bye-bye.